What's going on, everybody? How's it going? There we go. Cool. I think I got, well, my voice is transmitting at least. Is the music going? I think the music's going. Get some music going in the background. How's it going? How's it going? 3D print fan asks, any cool 3D prints going on today? Just printing more of the dragons. You can kind of see one like poking up here behind my chair. It's another one of the two-tone blue ones that I did the other day. But yeah, cool. Good to see you. How's everybody's weekend been? How's the holiday planning? Anybody do anything fun for holidays? Going out of town? Anything like that? Anything? Anyone? Bueller? Anyway, I'm Ian Douglas. I'm the author of this website, Tech Interview Guide. Author of this website, techinterview.guide. Made some swag. Zooey, how's it going? Good to see you in chat, bud. My weekend's been all right. How's your weekend been, Zooey? I got to write up a cover letter later tonight. I'm going to be applying for a pretty big job, bigger than a job I've ever done as far as like responsibility and stuff goes. For Peloton, one of my a bunch of my old students work there. Some of my co-teachers from Turing now work there. And one of them is encouraging me to apply for a director of engineering role, which would be director, several managers, and then them like under that. So I would be like way over them, hierarchy wise. Jen Develops, hey, good to see you in chat. Yeah, it's I guess it's been a minute since you've been around. 3D printed all kinds of these snowflakes, made some really, really big ones, hung some lights, all that fun stuff. I was had I gotten a job at the beginning of December like I had planned, I actually wanted to wire all these lights up to Raspberry Pi. So all the little pixie lights that are starting to fade out on my Christmas tree here, they are 1.5 volts each, and there's 2 of those. And I was going to chain them together and run off a 3-volt pin off a Raspberry Pi. And then these other lights up here, these are just little $2 sets from Walmart. Each of them takes 2 AA batteries, so they're each 3 volts. And I was going to run each of them off a Raspberry Pi pin and do something like tie it into the chat or something, and like have the Raspberry Pi watch the chat, and when activity happened in chat, like the lights would blink or something like that. Of course, job hunt all went to crap. And so I'm like, I kind of need to focus on resumes and cover letters and interviews instead of fussing with a Raspberry Pi. But it is on my to-do list, my ever-growing to-do list. So yeah, the Peloton role sounds pretty cool. So like director of engineering over a couple of managers, and that are then managing like I think the whole like e-commerce side of their website. Now I've got a background in e-commerce. The problem I'm running into is like I feel very, very qualified for the job, but it scares the crap out of me. Like having that much responsibility is huge. And I've had director level roles, but they've all been at like startups. And so I've never had a job where I've had a job where I've managed managers who then manage like people under them, but nowhere near the scale and sort of importance of what Peloton is. So I'm a little frightened. I'm going to be real. I'm a little scared to apply for that job, but I do need to write that cover letter. I promised my coworker who is referring me that I would get the cover letter over to them tomorrow morning. So I thought maybe I would do it on the stream tonight. And I might get some of you to help me like figure out what do I talk about, because I qualify for so much on their job post. I have to be really careful that I don't like try to oversell things in my cover letter. Like I want to be realistic about it. But I might ask some of you for some input as I do all that. Root user, good to see you in chat. Thanks you for the reminder to hydrate. No soda tonight. I'm not going to burp into my microphone. I have learned that several times. Let's see if X90 shows up. Their dragon arrived in Ottawa today. I believe the dragon made it to British Columbia for my other Canadian listener. I have not yet seen whether my dragon that went to Mexico has arrived yet. I've got one more behind me to deliver locally to Danger Box, and then another one to Creative Null that I keep forgetting to get to the mailbox and actually mail. That's happening tomorrow, I promise, but you won't get it until Christmas. Camilo, good to see you. Camilo, I don't know whether your dragon has arrived yet in Mexico or not, but I did mail it, and I believe I sent you the tracking information, but I misunderstood how Mexican addresses actually go on the, like here in America, it's like house number, street number, city, state, zip code. And yours, the way that I wrote it on a mailing label, it didn't make sense for like how addresses actually get sort of understood in Mexico. So I'm hoping that the way that the post office person like wrote everything out and then like drew little arrows all over it, I hope it makes it there. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Zooey, thanks for the encouragement on that. I'm nervous about it. Honestly, I'm nervous. It would be basically like coaching my managers, like presuming I get the job. I'd be coaching the managers and then like running the whole squad that works on the e-commerce side, as my understanding anyway. So I might get into some of that tonight. I've got one resume review to do. Harbender, good to see you in chat. Hello. Got one resume to review that someone sent me. They're from India and they did not anonymize their resume, and I didn't hear back from them about whether they were going to resubmit an anonymized resume. And I'm guessing that I didn't hear back from them because of the time difference. But I don't know. We'll see. Trash Dev, good to see you in chat. And so I'm going to take a look at their resume. They sent some notes along with it that they want me to kind of speak to a little bit. They do competitive programming, and they've been applying for internships at Facebook and Google. And so they want to know, like, what should I put on my resume? What should I highlight? What should I change about the resume to be more like attractive and sort of increase their chance of being seen at those companies? So I figure I'll do the resume review at some point this evening. I never heard back from them via email whether they wanted to anonymize their resume. I figured no one here is going to be calling them in India, so I think I'm okay like actually putting their resume on here. I may try and like zoom in a little bit and just say like, hey, above here is actually their contact info, and just not show it on the screen. I might do something like that and just say like from here down, this is like, you know, there's a vertical line and then like everything below here is just the content of the site. Just that way I don't like dox them on the internet, because that's not fun. I mean, some of their LinkedIn and so on is like on the resume anyway, but at least that way y'all won't see their phone number and their email address and stuff. So I'll do a resume review. If you're watching and you want a resume review, feel free to submit it. You can send it over right now. And MEB, good to see you. Hello. MEB, I think the last time you were on chat, you redeemed some points for me to go critique a job post, and I didn't catch it until after the stream. I was going back through the chat, and I'm like, oh, I missed that you redeemed points on that. So if you're still interested, I'll go find me a job post, and we'll roast it online together. How's that? We'll kind of go through and critique it, and see what we think of the job post. So cool. Well, I thought it was MEB. Maybe not. Maybe it wasn't. Somebody did, but I don't remember who it was. I thought it was MEB. But we'll see. And as always, if you've got questions, please drop them in chat. Happy to kind of go over that stuff. Gen Develops, you are working on some open source, and I'm kind of curious how that's going. I know that you and Carmen, I believe, were doing that. You were going to live stream some of the work on that. I haven't seen any Twitch notifications that you've actually been streaming. Gonna get ready with some popcorn if a roast is gonna happen. Yeah, I might roast a job post. I don't know. Someone go find me a job post, and I'll have a look. We'll see how much the temperature rises, whether I actually roast it or whether it's a pretty good job post. So we'll see. Or I could just show you the Peloton one that I'm going to apply for and kind of get all your input on. I mean, I'll probably show that to you anyway if I'm going to do my cover letter for it, because I got like a lot of notes that I want to sort of discuss and sort of like do like a side-by-side, like this is their job post and here are all the notes that I've written up, and like how do I condense all of those notes down into a cover letter, because I could literally speak to like 90% of their job post going, yep, done that, I've done that, I've done that, I've done that, let me tell you a story about that one. But some of it you want to save for the interview. Like you want to give them just enough to entice them to say like, oh, this person's got the skill that we want. Yeah, if you've got other questions in chat, drop them in. and we can definitely take a look at a handful of things kind of as we go. Tech Dinosaur, love the name. How do you fight ageism? Are you seeing it in your job hunt right now? Ooh, good question. Ageism is a thing in tech. I am approaching 50. I will be 48 next spring. Do I see it in my current job hunt? I mean, it's hard to know, like, I'm not being called because I've been in the industry such a long time. Does that intimidate some employers? Maybe. Does it intimidate, who I'd be working with? Maybe. I have a feeling that it was part of the reason I didn't get the Amazon job. Not the ageism side of it, but just a lot of my best stories that I kind of talked about during that Loop interview happened like a decade ago. And a lot of companies, when they're asking like, hey, tell me about a time, they want like a recent kind of time. Unfortunately, I only did like a couple of months at Stream because I was out for my shoulder surgery for a good chunk of the summer. And before that, it was all teaching experience at Turing for 4 years. And so I didn't have a lot of like, tell us stories from the last 5 years about, a time that you drastically improved, the performance of a system or something. It's like, I couldn't. I was teaching. Like, there was nothing really to improve, as far as that kind of stuff goes, because for what we did internally within the school, we just didn't have those kinds of systems to even go through to try to optimize. And so it was really hard to tell some of those stories. And I have a feeling that that's part of why I didn't get that job. Ageism is a thing, though. Am I seeing it elsewhere? I mean, like I said, it's really hard to tell. Like, it's kind of like if you put your location on your resume and you don't get picked because they don't want to relocate you, and they don't even call you, or they just say like, no, you're not, we don't think you're suitable for this role, but thanks for applying. You don't know why they're not calling. And that's the unfortunate part with bias, is it's really hard to really confirm that, oh yeah, you just don't want me to work there because I'm old. It is definitely a thing, but how much of a thing, it's really hard to say. It's really, really hard to kind of guess at that sort of stuff. Jen Develop says, oh, you haven't started up because of the holidays. Cool. Planning on rewinding the project, going back to the wireframing, show people how to organize a project when you start out. That's very cool. And so Jen and Carmen are working on an app, I believe, for people to submit questions for their for the Jonan Show Code School Q&A. Just trying to remember the title. Code School Q&A here on Twitch. If you're watching on YouTube, go over to twitch.tv/The Jonan Show, and you can check them out. They usually stream on Wednesday evenings. Jen, any ETA on when Jonan's going to be back? Because he was off for a little while, and now he's got a new addition to the family, so he will be away for a little while. But I'm curious if the rest of the team's going to get together, if you're going to fill in for Jonan. Because it's a great show. Like, you definitely need to tune in and follow them as well. So I'll give a little shout out here. I'll just drop it in chat. Twitch.tv, The Jonan Show. So definitely go give them a follow and go check that out. That'll be typically on Wednesdays. Jen Develops also asks in chat, question about ageism. Do you think after a while it's harder to find individual contributor roles? That's IC. The further you get in your career, because people management is seen as an upgrade. Sometimes. I mean, it really depends on the company. Some companies are really good about splitting. Like, once you reach kind of senior dev, it's like, okay, well, now do you want to split and become like a lead and then get into manager and then go, director and kind of up that scale? Or do you want to be senior dev and then get into like lead dev, but more on the development side, and then get into like principal and staff and architect and whatever kinds of roles? And so a lot of companies will do kind of a dual track. Smaller companies, though, like as you progress, it's like, okay, well, until we actually hire those levels of management, like we kind of need you to fill in and at least lead the team and make sure that everybody's like happy and they're doing their job and they feel motivated and things like that. And so in my own career, that's kind of what my transition was, is I was getting senior enough as a developer that they're like, let's get you to lead a team. You can do one-on-ones. You won't have like hire, fire kinds of responsibilities, but we do need you to kind of like lead the team, manage the team, sort of divvy up the work, figure out who's going to work on what. direct them a little bit and work on motivations and just hear about their happiness, and if there are trends going on, like tell upper management kind of thing. And so it wasn't like, oh, let me go tell you what Jen told me in my one-on-one. No, that all stayed with me. But I could go to management and say, hey, some of my team are happy about this and some of them are unhappy about this. And so it still kept the communication open. My team knew that I was always going, with full confidence of privacy, that whatever they shared with me stayed with me, and that I would go and like kind of anonymize things as much as possible. It wasn't always possible, but as much as possible, like I would never mention their name. And so, and I also do that as a manager as well. Like I always tell people, like, if you come to me with something, like unless you want me to say your name's not going to be attached to anything that I kind of report upwards. We call it managing up. Well, there's managing up and there's reporting up. Managing up is like, it sounds a bit manipulative, but it's like, how can I manage my manager to do what my team needs? So it does feel a little bit manipulative sometimes, but honestly, that's what they do on the way down, is they're figuring out how do they motivate the team to do stuff. But anyway, so going back to Jen's question, is it harder to find individual contributor roles because of seeing management as being an upgrade? Upgrade, I'm glad you put it in air quotes, because for some, they don't find it an upgrade at all. Either way, like whether you go kind of that management track or you go up the really senior individual contributor track, you're writing less code. If you go up management, you're usually writing no code at all. But as you kind of go up that really senior level of like staff principal, architect kind of thing, you're doing almost no coding at all. Like the higher you get, you're doing almost no code, but you're doing lots of research. You may do a bit of prototyping, but it's mostly research and just trying to figure out, like, where do we take the technology of the team? Is it time to change the language? Is it time to upgrade to a new version of something? Is it time to like overhaul? Is it time to do containers? Is it a time to like move to the cloud? Like that's going to be more the architect level stuff, where you're figuring out more of the pieces, and then you're directing the teams with your peer on the management side to say, hey, I need a team that can go build this. I need a team that can go build this. This is how they should work together, and basically you're orchestrating how those teams are going to work. And so you're playing like the technical side of the management thing, where the actual manager or director, they're responsible for the people management. Like, take care of the people. Are they happy? Are they, do they understand the why of what you're doing? Do they feel motivated? What are those motivators? Like dealing with, compensation and raises and hiring and firing and all that stuff too. So that would typically be the management track versus the technical side. Jen says they streamed on Wednesday. I think the schedule's up in the air because of the new baby. Yeah. I think I missed their stream on Wednesday. I don't remember if I tuned in. I might have tuned in. I don't recall now. Things have been a little hectic with the job hunt. So not there yet, but I don't know if I want to manage people. Yeah. And some people don't. And that's okay too. If you don't want to manage people, you should never feel forced down that track. Some companies are like, yeah, you're either a senior dev and the only way forward in our company is to get into a manager role. Some companies are small enough that that's just the way it works out. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can always just kind of plant yourself and say, nope, I want to keep coding. I want to keep being involved in the technology. I would rather not deal with the people management, and that's okay. People go to like full-blown degrees to like learn business and business ethics and that kind of stuff in order to be really good people managers. I kind of went to the school of hard knocks on that one. I've been managing people. Let's see, Rubicon was 2008, 2009. That's when I officially had like kind of a lead manager, lead/manager kind of role. I was a lead developer on a team of 3 developers. And I managed 2 managers that then managed a group of like 20 to 30 part-time data entry people. And so I had to have like the daily stand-up with all of them and like figure out, okay, who's working on which data entry, and sort of like I would hear from those 2 managers and kind of direct them a little bit. And then for my own development team, then I was in charge of divvying up our work and figuring out who's working on what. But yeah, not everybody's cut out to be a people manager, and not everybody wants to, even if they are kind of good at it. Some people just don't like it. As I would do people management, I would miss doing contributing, and as I would do contributing, I miss people managing. And so some of my career, I kind of bounced back and forth. which is also making my job hunt hard right now, because when people go look at my LinkedIn, they're like, what are you? Are you a manager? Are you a developer? Are you developer relations? Like, what are you? And I had someone kind of critique my own LinkedIn last week, and they're like, yeah, I looked at your LinkedIn. I can't tell what you want to do. Like, you say you're on a job hunt, you're looking for these roles, but like, what role? And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. So I kind of went in and I kind of like narrowed it down a little bit, but I think I'm going to change the banner on LinkedIn from the tech interview guide banner to just say like, these are the roles that I'm looking for in this order. Like, I'm looking for a developer relations role, and then I'm looking for a manager role, and then I'm looking for a contributor, like architect kind of role. So we'll see. I don't know. I haven't really decided yet on that. Most of the roles that I'm interviewing for next are going to be developer relations, except for the Peloton one. The Peloton one's going to be like a manager role. Aside from that, I'm not applying for too many manager roles, because I really like the customer interaction. I like the hands-on development. I like going to like talk events and conferences and stuff like that. So we'll see. Jen says, I'm glad there's a more parallel role at some companies, because I agree, management's not for everyone. I find I don't really hear about how to get to staff or principal engineer as much as I hear about how to get to management. Yeah. Are there any people on Twitter in the DevRel space that have talked about this topic? So I have seen some companies that actually publish like what that progression looks like on the technical side, like to go from entry-level role to intermediate, from intermediate to senior, or from senior to, principal to staff or architect, or like whatever that hierarchy is. Some of them are very clear, like these are the responsibilities you will take on or the experience that you have, and then this is what you need to do to promote up to that next role. At SendGrid, we had a very well-defined list, and I believe somebody actually got that somewhere off the internet. But there are some very clearly defined lists of like, these are kind of the bare minimum, sorts of things. And for SendGrid, some of it was the time of the experience. Like, if you had less than 2 years of experience, you were just entry level no matter what. It didn't matter. Like, you could have been working on really, really great, interesting, scalable things, but because your total amount of time in the industry was low, you got brought in at a lower level just regardless. There was one person that we hired, his name was Andrew. He had like 4.5 years experience, and they're like, we're not even going to call anybody a senior until they had like 6 or 7 years. And I'm like, but go look at the stuff that he's worked on. Like, this Andrew guy has done a ton of stuff. I'm going to advocate to bring him in at a senior level. And they're like, no, he's not senior. He doesn't meet these qualifications. I'm like, no, based on the history of what he's done and where he has worked, he in my mind deserves a senior title. And so I advocated for him, and I gave him a senior title. And other people, they're like, like maybe they're not quite senior yet, or we called them a senior, but they actually don't meet these qualifications. And so they're just going to sit there until they show this progression. And so it started getting a little political. And that was around the time I'm like, I'm going to leave. Because I was also the VP that I worked under that absolutely insisted and mandated everybody that applies to the engineering team must have a CS degree, period. I will not even look at any resumes or consider a hire unless they have a CS degree. I'm like, we're writing like, Backbone? It was a JavaScript library on the front end. And it's like, we're building like a really simple dashboard. We're asking people to write simple JavaScript and HTML and CSS. They do not need a CS degree. He's like, won't hear it. They must have a CS degree. I'm like, I'm out. Like, if you're that inflexible on something that absolutely does not need a CS degree, I'm not going to work under you. And so that was part of my motivation for leaving. I just didn't want to deal with that. So, and then I found out later that one of my other colleagues that worked there that didn't have a degree, and keep in mind, I also did not have a degree. I don't have a bachelor's degree in computer science. I have a 3-year college diploma from a community college in computer engineering, and they didn't complain about me. But this other person didn't have a degree, and they basically walked up to him one day and said, you're not going to last here. You don't have a degree. You're just not, you don't have a future here at the company, and basically pressured them out of the company. And I'm like, that's such a dumb thing to do. Anyway, that whole management level ended up leaving the company. And then I think things got a little better. But I have respect for like one of the managers that were like between me and that VP, but I don't have a ton of respect for that VP. Anyway, that was all at SendGrid, Camilla. Yeah, good times. I think I would miss coding and want to lay Legos down. Yeah, so people stepped on them. Nice. That's funny, Amy B. Yeah, I mean, thanks, Nikki, or Nick. I think advocating for people is such a big part of being in the industry. When you get to a certain seniority level, you become an advocate for everybody under you, for whatever that is, whether it was hiring or promotions or like just, hey, go check out this thing that Nick made. Like, Nick's been picking up all this stuff on the side. They've been like, learning all these things that are applicable to the team, and they're doing it on their own time. Like, let's recognize that. Like, just go into management and be like, whatever that is. Like, just, even if you just give them a shout out at an all hands and be like, hey, by the way, Nick, built this thing. We really appreciate, Nick, that you're like doing the stuff on the side. And, in front of like 200 peers is like, whoa, you knew about that? Because I would go and tell management about that. It's like, give them some kind of praise or like some sort of reason to like keep wanting to do that sort of stuff. Like, it makes a big difference on the team when you know that there's somebody on the team rooting for you. So yeah, so it's like this kind of stuff I want to talk about in that cover letter for the director of engineering role. That's like, that letter is going to be like 3 pages long if I write all the things, that map to their job post. But I'll pull it up and like I said, maybe I'll get some of you to help me with the cover letter and sort of narrowing down like which points should I talk to or not. So we'll kind of see. Zooey says, once I got to management, advocating for people was a great part of it. Yeah, and it's great just from the emotional side of it, but it's also like really important just to build that trust that your team knows you've got them. You're taking care of them. You're looking out for them. You're looking out for their best interests. Like when I managed one team, for example, I would say, hey, if you're on call for 7 days. At the end of that 7 days, we're going to figure out like how much on-call time you actually worked. And I'm going to give you that amount of time off before you start your next work week. So if your on-call duty went from like Monday to Sunday, that next Monday, you would kind of do your handoff to like the next person that was going to be on call of like, hey, this is where things left off, just in case this happens, this is what I took care of. If you were up at night, you got time and a half. If you took care of it during the day and you had to drop something else, you got that amount of time off before you even started your next work week. And so that Monday morning would be the handoff and then go home for the day. Or like you get to work remotely, just call in, have that handoff meeting, and then like take the rest of the day off or whatever like that comparable time was. And my team was like, you're giving us like, I don't want to use up my PTO for that. I'm like, no, it's not PTO. You just get that time off because you were on call, and that's stressful enough. You feel like you can't leave the house. You've always got to have a laptop with you. You've got to be, pay attention to like pager duty. If that thing goes off, you got to wake up and you got to do your thing. So if that happened, they got comp time that didn't count against their PTO. It was just a verbal agreement that we had on the team. And some of the team were like, really? Like, yeah, like you can come to the office if you want to, but I expect you're going to play some ping pong and that you're not actually going to work on tickets with people. That, if you want to like come to the office because of the camaraderie and you just want to like go sit and like learn something new, do that. If you'd rather go get caught up on groceries and do your laundry, stay home and do that. Like whatever that time is for you, you get that time off. And the team were like, really? It's like, yeah, you're on call. Like, why wouldn't I do that? Some companies are like, yep, you're on call. Cool, your shift is over. It's Monday morning. Like, here's the sprint. Get started. Can I get a job under me once I'm a manager? Maybe. I mean, if I get that director role, I think the first person I'm going to hire is Zooey. But I've already made introductions for Zooey to actually go apply at Peloton anyway, so we'll see. So hopefully, the same person that's referring me to the director of engineering role, I think is also going to refer Zooey to apply there too. So we'll see. It'd be pretty cool to work with Zooey for sure. But yeah, we'll see. I got to get the job first. And then Emmy, sure, why not? I'll have to see your resume. I mean, I don't know anything about your background, about your skills. Like, yeah, I hired this rando person that just hung out on my Twitch chat. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Cool. So I had, like I said, I had that one resume come in. I had that I'll do the review for, and then I'll probably just kind of go over my job plan. I actually moved away from the Smarter Recruiter thing, and I actually moved all of my job stuff over to a Trello board just so I could have more columns. The Smarter board, I couldn't actually drag things around when I wanted to, and you had to like constantly refresh, and if you clicked in the wrong spot, it would close panels, and it was kind of janky to use. So I just moved everything over to a Trello board. It'll make it a little easier for me to track things. So I'll show that off later, and then we'll do that cover letter maybe. Twitch approved, yeah, for sure. Python Nate says, thanks for all the advice. Been learning a long time. As a Python developer, how can I level up my skill, like new frameworks, libraries? Let's see, as a Python developer, I mean, Python's been around for quite a while, like 25, almost 30 years now, maybe. As far as leveling up your skill, I would say stay current with whatever the newest version of the language is. I think it's 3.8, 3.9. I know it's at least 3.8. 3.9 might be out now. So stay current on that. And then as far as frameworks go, like Django's a big one if you're doing like full-blown web development. If you're going to get into services, I would probably look at Flask. And if you're getting into like microservices, look at Falcon, like the bird, Falcon. Falcons are really great, like really small microservice. Doesn't have a lot built in, but neither does Flask. And so if you need database stuff, you got to like build all that kind of stuff in. But Falcon is really, really fast for microservices. Flask has kind of been my go-to over the years. I've been using Flask now for a decade. Like long time ago, I picked up on Flask, and I'm like, this framework's amazing. So yeah, I would keep going with Flask myself, just to kind of like build out services. And then if it needed to get even smaller than that, I would probably do a microservice. I might stay with Flask because of just my familiarity with it, but I have used Falcon a little bit, and it's actually a pretty nice framework too. But the smaller those frameworks get, the more you have to build into it yourself. And so if you need database connectivity, and security and things like that, you're gonna have to build a lot of that into Falcon. Flask has some of that stuff, but Flask also has a pretty good community for like different plugins and sort of how to build what we call blueprints. Which is sort of like a snapshot of a project, and then you can copy that and it gets you up to speed a little bit faster. I think you can also use blueprints a little bit like a component as well, where you can say like, I just want to take this thing and like bring it in as a blueprint within the same project and like use that sort of component again. And so you can look into Flask blueprints as well. And then one of the guys that I found out after I didn't get the job at Twilio, there's a guy that I know who wrote a book on Flask. His name is Miguel Grinberg. He actually works at Twilio now. I'm like, oh, that would have been amazing to work with Miguel. I met him at a Python conference back in like 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. Really, really great guy. And I found out like way too late that he also worked at Twilio. It would have been really cool to work with Miguel. We wouldn't have been on the same team, but just, be able to interact and be like, hey, remember me? That would have been kind of cool. Python Nate says, thanks. Yeah, no worries. So like as far as leveling up that skill, like just stay really current on those things. Reach out to Python communities, find out like what are they working on, how can you continue to like do like service-based stuff in the cloud. Python also plays really well with a lot of cloud providers that are doing serverless. And someone actually asked me the other day, like, what's the difference between like a cloud instance and like the serverless? And basically the cloud instance, you're sort of renting the whole CPU and RAM, and it's just kind of running all the time. Like I have an instance at DigitalOcean that does my my mailing list. So all the emails that I send out, that you can see down in the bottom corner down here, you see that scrolling text. Actually, it should be coming through right now. It talks about the daily email series. That all runs through a DigitalOcean instance. And so I have basically a virtual server which is using like RAM and CPU all the time. And so I can log in at any time and it's there, it's ready to go. Serverless is more like I have just a function, and it's like event driven, where something hits it and then that code runs and it gives back a response and it goes to sleep right away. So you're not renting like a whole system. It's watching for some kind of event to happen, and then it just runs like a little bit of code and then it finishes. That's kind of the idea of serverless. And so by calling it serverless is you're not getting a whole server, you're just getting like a very small amount of time to actually go run your code. And usually those serverless functions, they've got to run like, I think on AWS, I think they have to run within 15 minutes or they get shut off or interrupted. And so you can run them like on an as needed basis, but if it takes more than 15 minutes to run, it just gets interrupted. Then you got to wait for like another event to like pick up where it left off or something like that. I could probably move my mailing list stuff over to a serverless instance, where I'd end up paying a lot less than like, I think I'm paying DigitalOcean like $8 a month or something for that server. But I get a whole server to myself and I can log in anytime and do whatever I need on there. So it's kind of nice having like the whole server that I can manage and take care of. But I'm responsible for the security and the well-being of that virtual server and stuff too. So Zooey says June is nice. Yeah, so June is the person that's referring us for these jobs. He said he'd talk to me after his vacation next week. Contact in January. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Relewa, not sure if that's how to pronounce your name, but appreciate the follow. Welcome to the stream. I'm Ian. I wrote this whole website, Tech Interview Guide. I'm just here to help people with my perspectives and so on getting into the tech industry. You've been watching my YouTube? Awesome. Appreciate that. Thanks for dropping by the real thing. You get to participate in real time. So cool. Thanks for dropping by. Appreciate it. Thanks for the follow. Cool. So let's dive into that resume review real quick. Again, the person's in India, and I've scrolled the resume down enough that you won't see their name and their email and their phone number, and just kind of give you my thoughts on the resume. So as with all my resume reviews, I typically start them with opinions are like armpits. Everybody's got a couple. Some of them stink. Don't ever listen to just my opinion. I've looked at probably 10,000 to 15,000 resumes over my career. I've looked at a lot of resumes. I have opinions on what makes a good resume. As a hiring manager, as a lead developer, when I'm going in to interview somebody, I want to be able to find information quickly on the resume. So I have thoughts and opinions on how to do that, but they're my thoughts and opinions. Go get lots of opinions. Go get lots of perspectives, and then figure out how you want to make your own resume. These are just my thoughts, kind of in sort of real time as we go. So let me switch over to that screen. All right. So as I mentioned, like off the top of the screen is basically their contact info. So I'm just kind of hiding that, and I'll be looking kind of away from the camera, just because that's where I've got it kind of pulled up. And so they've got their education up here, top left with links. So they were specifically asking, I want an internship. Was it an internship? They've been applying for internships at Google and Facebook. They do competitive programming, and they want to know, like, how can I make some changes in my resume to get selected? I can't guarantee that by making any of these changes, you're going to get selected by anybody. These are just my thoughts and opinions and what I know about certain companies. I will say certain companies really like education more than they like the skills that you have. So having the education up here in the top left, like right under your contact information, could really help. Pretty good GPA, 8.5 out of 10. What does that work out to in American GPA on like a 4-point scale? So like 8.5 divided by 2.5, it's like a 3.4-ish. I've heard from some people like don't even put the GPA on the resume unless it's 3.5 or higher, because again, some companies will bias against that. But they're going to look at this and go 8.5 out of 10, like that's 85%. That's okay. So yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with having the GPA on there. I would say if you really need the space on there, like remove it. So they've got an expected graduation date of August 2023, and they're going to school in India. They have a bachelor's in computer science from Bangalore, and then they've got like their GitHub link and LinkedIn and this Code Forces, which I think is the competitive programming that they do. It's like a 3.3 GPA. Yeah, and I mean, if that's the case, I would probably take the GPA off the resume. That would just be my thought. Okay, so let's talk about these headings. They've got education, links, coursework, skills, experience, but experience is like tiny compared to all of the other headings. And then down here, they got projects. They've got more empty space between this heading and Hack-E-Earth than they do between like their last experience and their actual project work. They've got like a lot of sort of empty space in between these headings but this one here feels really crammed together. So yeah, I would work on the overall like balance of how things are laid out a little bit. Also, these headings like projects and achievements, they're sort of left justified with the actual text on here, where this one up here, the experience one, seems to be indented a little bit. So yeah, I would make sure that that's the same font size, that it's not indented, and then just, make sure that the amount of sort of white space around those headings is kind of standardized across the page. They're kind of going right to the bottom of the page, so you don't want to push that too much. As far as like that bottom margin, you don't want to make it seem like you're going edge to edge and like right to the very bottom. But you've also got a lot of empty space here in between as well. So if you really needed the room, you could probably pull this whole right column over to the left a tiny bit if you did need the extra room. So that would be some thoughts there. Trash Devs has so many bolds. My eyes don't know where to go. I mean, all they've bolded is like the name of the school and some of the coursework that they've done, and then like the companies and stuff. So for me, the amount of bold is okay. What I don't like is the change in font. Like how they've written Bangalore is in a much thinner, like compressed font than any other text on the page. And then this project, like Journal, it looks like it's using that compressed font again and maybe a different size. On my screen, it's actually like a dark charcoal gray, where this is like dark, like pure black. And so like there's a lot of font change on here, and that actually gets tiring to read. So first thing I would do is I would come through, I would just highlight all of this stuff from education all the way down and just say like 10-point font, all of this stuff, make it the same font face on all of this stuff, and then go in and change just these headings to be, a different font size. If you want to use a different font at that point, you can, but make everything the same font, everything the same font size, everything the same font color. And then if you want to add like a splash of color or like something stand out a little bit, then do the headings. But aside from that, like there's a lot of change going on here. And y'all know me, I hate this vertical bar as like a separator on here. I'm just not a fan of the vertical bar. Just put a comma or put white space in there, it doesn't matter. But that vertical bar is really interruptive to actually read, like from a psychological point of view. Your brain kind of goes, what's this? Oh, and then you keep reading. So yeah, I would typically remove those completely. MEB says the first point under his second experience is off as well. So the bullet points here don't exactly line up either. Like these bullet points line up, these bullet points line up, and then it kind of goes back. Like the bullet points for the projects line up with the bullet point from the first job experience, but these bullet points here are just slightly indented, just a tiny bit more. It feels petty to point that out. I will say, like, it feels weird to like point that out. But some people are going to look at this and go, something's off about this resume. They may not be able to articulate it. They may not be able to explain what they see as wrong or like what feels off. But it's going to feel off when they actually look at it. And they're like, no, something's not right about this resume. And some people will use that as enough bias to go, nah, I'm just going to pass on it. Like something's off about this, and they'll just pass on it. When we're looking at resumes, we're looking for a reason to say no. We got a lot of these to get through. And so the easier you can make things to read and the easier you can make things to find on the page, the more likely you're going to get that phone call. Again, nothing I say is going to guarantee that you get a phone call, but these would be things that I would coach somebody on. Camilo says maybe achievements should be bullet points instead of numbers. Yeah, so the achievements down here, they've numbered. So again, you're like kind of breaking that convention. Down here, it felt like you had to kind of go into like a multiple column format within the column in order to fit everything that you wanted. So you might want to change that up a little bit. I also thought it was kind of interesting too that this is I think the first time I've seen this on a resume where they're saying like, hey, for this programming language, I've written this many lines of code. I would be careful to know, like, are those actual lines of code, or is that just, I did like a word count -L, like WC-L in Linux or Mac to get the number of lines in a file, and I just summed all that up, because that's also going to be white space and comments, and that doesn't count as lines of code. Plus 10,000 lines, to quote Mitch Hedberg, that's a really even number. Not that I would look for like an exact number, but like say like 10,000 plus, or put a tilde next to it, like about 10,000 lines or something like that. But I thought it was kind of an interesting sort of metric because, like, I hate seeing like progress indicators like I'm a 4 out of 5 on Python. It's like, what does that even mean? Where here it's like, oh, you've actually written like quite a lot of C++ code. You've written a lot of Python code. Why isn't this one comma delimited like the first one? 10,000, you've got a comma in there. 5,000, 1,000, you don't. So again, you got to be consistent about this kind of stuff. Otherwise, people are looking at it going, something's off. Again, you're kind of putting multiple things together on this line where the other ones are kind of separate, like each one on a line. Also, I wouldn't typically put MySQL and MongoDB as programming skills. When I think of programming and you're listing all these languages, it's like, okay, these are the programming languages that you know. Down here where you're talking about other development, you're listing all the other tools where you're also listing Firebase, which is a database. So why isn't Mongo and MySQL down here with Firebase, or why isn't Firebase up here with MySQL and Mongo? So I would be more careful about how you're grouping these things together. You're giving me very high level, sort of like this is what I studied in school. I think you could probably remove some of this stuff because, yeah, you're going to computer science for school. I hope that you're taking algorithms and data and like data structures and things like that. Like these kinds of things don't need to be on the resume. Cloud computing, I mean, if you're learning that as part of your graduate studies, okay, but like which cloud? You don't list any of it down here in your skills. So are you doing AWS? Are you doing Azure? Are you doing Google Cloud? Are you doing Oracle Cloud? Are you doing Red Hat Cloud? Like there's a lot of cloud out there. Whose cloud are you using? Just be more specific about that. But yeah, I would take data structures, computer networking off. I would take analysis of algorithms. You could probably leave that one on. They would probably be curious like what you've actually learned about that. Cryptography, leave that on. Leave machine learning on. And again, you can reorganize this list because typically a hiring manager is going to look at this list and go, the things at the top are the most important things that I need to know about. So this tells me that you've put more emphasis on cryptography than you have on machine learning. But if you're applying for a machine learning job, put machine learning at the top of that list. Because anybody reading the resume is going, is this person machine learning? And they're going to kind of scan through and go, oh, look, machine learning. And so like definitely reorganize these things. To give you more room down here, I would shorten these lists. So the things to remove again, take data structures off, take computer networks off. Again, data structures you've repeated here, but that can also be taken away. Undergrad studies, like learning about operating systems is fine, but like I know from computer science that you're learning how the operating system works, but some people are going to look at that and go, okay, so you know how to use a Mac or you know how to use Windows, but that's not the same as like operating system development or like actually coding for an operating system, like kernel level kinds of things. So you may want to be a little more specific about this one. Database management, you could probably leave that on. Object-oriented programming, take that off. That's an expectation. Computer architecture, I would probably explain a little bit more maybe. System level programming is kind of the same as the operating system one, so I would leave one of them on and take the other one off. In this case, I would leave the system programming but get rid of the operating system one. And then Unix tools and scripting. I mean, if you've done like shell scripting, I would list that down here as a skill. Like you've done Bash or C shell or like whatever shell you've used or Z shell or whatever, list that down here, and then you can take this off. Like, yeah, you took a class on it, okay, but like, are you using it on a regular basis? If it's something that you're using on a regular basis, I would list that as a skill and not just a class you took. A lot of American resumes or for resumes for American companies, you wouldn't list all of your classes. You would just list a lot more about your skills. So it really depends on what kind of emphasis you want to put on your background for the employer. Do you want to sort of focus and point out the classes that you have taken? The other thing is you've got the education here where you're doing your master's degree until 2023. You're listing out coursework for your master's, but is this current coursework? Is this coursework you've already taken, or is this everything that you're going to take until 2023? Because if you're getting if you want an internship now, but you haven't yet studied some of this stuff, get rid of it. Don't put it on a resume. Because if I'm looking for somebody that's done cryptography and you're like, oh, well, I actually don't take that class until next year. why is it on your resume? If you haven't actually learned it yet, if you can't talk about it in an interview, it should get taken off. If these are courses that you have taken so far, then leave them on. But just something to keep in mind there. MEB says, one bullet point on my resume wraps, I couldn't shorten it. The bullets on web and mobile are kind of scattered too compared to the other bullets. Yeah, like they really don't line up on here. And I get that they want to point out mobile development with React Native and Android, but you could list Android first, which would be much shorter, and then where this bullet point would kind of start, you could have like React Native, to kind of like go underneath these bullet points over here, and it wouldn't look so off. But I would also just say Android and just take the word development off of here. Like development's kind of a redundant term at this point. Also, grouping Firebase and Docker together is a little off because one's a database and one's a tool to actually deploy things in a container. So again, I would probably reduce the coursework that you're talking about and explain more about the actual skills that you have. So let's go look at the experience on here. So algorithm curator. So you're currently there. Curation of problems and writing editorials for algorithmic programming. Hackathons, contests held on Hacker Earth. So be careful about the grammar. You've got a lot of pluralization on this line about what you're actually doing in this role. I think this is the competitive programming. I'm also not sure, like, is there supposed to be an extra E in here? Because it does look a little off to have an extra E in here. If that's the actual name, then that's fine. But if this is the competitive programming that you do, I would add that to the bullet point and say this is the competitive programming that you do. Curation of problems and writing editorials. So that makes me think that you're actually like building hackathons for this company. The way that I read this, it sounds like you're designing this event. Like this is part of your role, is that you design hackathon events by curating and collecting problems and writing editorials. If that's the case, I think this needs to be written a little bit more to say that you actually plan these events and this is a responsibility of planning that event. Because right now the way that it's kind of set up to read, it sounds a little disjointed as far as like what's the actual responsibility of the role. So I would look at that. Camilo asks, is this one page long? Yeah, it's all a one-page resume. Aren't hackathons contests? It does seem a bit redundant. I mean, yeah, hackathons are usually contests, but sometimes they're just an event. Like, hey, we're just going to have this event and it's a hackathon and there's no prizes. You're just, everybody get together and like form a team and work on some stuff. It certainly helps to motivate people when there's a contest and you're actually like giving money away or giving away prizes. I've been at hackathons that give away like thousands of dollars. For a while, I actually had heard of people like going to hackathons as their full-time job. Like they would literally hit a hackathon like every weekend. They would travel, like they would make enough money to like travel to hackathons around the country, compete for a weekend, win potentially thousands of dollars, and that was their income to then like, go to the next hackathon. And in between hackathons, they're like leveling up their skills and they're getting really super competitive and figuring out ways to automate what they do. And then like try to plan like which hackathons am I going to and all that kind of stuff. So it can be lucrative if you are going to hackathons where they actually pay out prize money. But with COVID, I think a lot of the hackathons and a lot of those events really shut down. So, but if that is this role, like if you're planning these events and as part of that, these are the responsibilities, because this is already 2 lines, I would make 2 bullet points. The first bullet point is like, responsible for coordinating or planning hackathon events held on this Hacker Earth website. In this case, you've actually spelled it out as Hacker Earth. Where up here, I think you're missing the R in Hacker Earth. So again, like just double check the spelling on that. So I would do that as the first bullet point, and then the second bullet point is like, what do you actually do for those events? And then that's where you could say like curate problems or curate like scenarios or something like that for the hackathons and writing editorials about algorithmic programming, something along those lines. Next one, undergrad research. You were there for a year, modeling and in vitro experimentation of drug delivery systems. You've got an extra space in front of this M, it looks like. It's indented slightly from where the A begins. Analyzed non-Darcy flow of blood in tumors by Monte Carlo simulations on C++ with random and non-random. So again, like this and is all like really crammed together. Random and non-random resistances in it. Interesting. Okay. Not really like a little bit of software development, but I would probably take this one out. Like if you're presenting yourself as a software developer, this first bullet point, I would either put like second or just take it off completely. Unless you're going to like a pharmaceutical kind of company, but what they mentioned in the email is they're targeting Microsoft and Google, or Facebook and Google, apologies. Google is kind of trying to get into like the health system. If that's where you're applying for an internship, then you could keep this kind of stuff on here. But if you're just applying just to be a software developer or software intern at those companies that's not going to be part of the health group, I would probably take this first bullet point off because it's not as important as like doing the C++ stuff. And I would probably start this whole line with like used C++ to simulate blah, blah, blah. So again, you're pointing out that, you know, I'm a developer, I use C++ to model this simulation. As opposed to like, I got to read the whole first sentence in order to see that you were programming it and using C++ for it. Teaching assistant for software engineering. Why is engineering a capital E in IT workshop? Mentor students to help them get started with competitive programming. So because this is in the past, I would put this in the past tense. So you've mentored students, and students would be a lowercase s. To help them get started with. I think there's an easier way that you could probably say this. Mentored students about competitive programming, or introduced and mentored students about competitive programming or something like that. You could probably reduce it and just get it down to one line. So all of these were at the same school, I guess. So while you were getting your bachelor's degree, like all this stuff was going on. So you were also an intern there for 3 months, it looks like. Derive formulas, analyze data points, design and wrote backend APIs. You need a space after this comma. Created UI components using React.js. So it should be React.lowercase JS. So you got to make sure that you're spelling things right. Integrated the units. What is the units? Tested and deployed on production, all individually within 4 months. Kind of feels like you're missing a space in here, all individually. So yeah, again, just double check the spacing and the grammar. Again, this is where I would just highlight all the text on here and just say make everything the same font, everything the same font size, and make sure that there are spaces and so on where you expect them, and you remove them where you don't need them, just so it makes it a little easier to read. Developed an analytical dashboard from scratch using React.js, Node.js, MySQL, writing 150 plus backend APIs. That's a lot. Like 150 backend APIs? Like I would slap GraphQL in front of that, and now you've got one endpoint, and then, you know, write your queries or something like that. That would be a lot easier than building 150 API endpoints. That's a lot of endpoints. To say you were there in 3 months and you wrote 150 endpoints? As a hiring manager, I'm suspicious. Like you wrote in 3 months, you wrote 150 backend API endpoints and all of the work that they needed to do, plus 100 React components. That's 250 things in 12 weeks. That's 10 things per week, 10 plus per week. So that's several per day. That feels like a lot to me. Camillo asks in chat, shouldn't these be reversed, starting with position, location? Not necessarily. I mean, every resume is a little bit different. Like you can put the dates over on the right margin. You can move the location around wherever you want. How you design it and how you lay that out is really up to you. It's like I'm worried a lot less about the format as I am about like how are they presenting this content, because some of it's pretty wordy and some of it, like I said, I'm suspicious about this doing all of this in only a 3-month period, where when you get in there, you've got the whole ramp up of like, how do we do what we do? How do we work as a team? Like sometimes that can take a week or two. And then, you know, so let's call this 12 weeks, 10 weeks. In that 10 weeks, you wrote 250 things in 10 weeks. That's actually 25 per week. That's, if you work Monday to Friday, that's 5 things per day, 5 endpoints or React components or combination of them every single day, Monday to Friday for 10 weeks straight. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I'm a good programmer, and I wouldn't be able to output that much. Like, that's a lot, you know, and then to make sure that it's all like properly tested and, you know, all this kind of stuff. You also say within 4 months. So September, October, November, if it was like the full month of December, like, okay, so even in 4 months. Well, now we're, let's call it like 14, 15 weeks. Let's call it 15 weeks. 15 weeks, 250 things. That's still more than like a dozen things per week, right? I think my math is off. It feels like a lot of work. It feels like way more than one person would accomplish. If this was like team effort, yes, I would believe it. But tell me how big the team was. This would be something that as a hiring manager, I would be like, if I were to call you, I would be like, tell me about this. Tell me, like, was it literally the exact same thing and you were just like copying and pasting and like changing a couple things? Because then, yeah, I could see like where you're like kind of ramp up on some of that. But that feels like a lot of work to accomplish in 4 months of work. Yeah. BK the Awesome, thanks for the follow. Welcome to the chat. Wrote a handful of APIs in 1.5 years. Yeah. I mean, I've written like really busy API endpoints, but it would be like, you know, 1 or 2 like fully tested, fully scalable kinds of endpoints per day. But this person's on the you know, bordering on like 4 or 5 per day, Monday to Friday. Yeah, I'm not saying that they're lying on the resume, but it feels like it was either embellished or this was a group project and they were just talking about like as a group, this is what we did. But I don't buy that a single individual did that much work in that amount of time. Now, if they were working 7 days a week, okay, but then I'd be asking, why are you working 7 days a week? Excuse me. I remember to not breathe when I'm swallowing. All right, moving on. We got some project work. So I would say all of this work experience here is pretty relevant. Like I said, I would probably get rid of this one bullet point, but everything else on here definitely feels like programming. And so this work experience should definitely outweigh the project work that you've done. That said, you've got some project stuff on here where you're actually talking quite a lot about. I would probably reduce the text on these things a little bit. Now, the fact that this one you're using Google Cloud Vision API, you know, you're applying for a job at Google, so that's going to stand out to them. Facebook is also getting into a lot of VR, so that's going to stand out to them. So being able to use that kind of stuff, like definitely keep that project on here. I would almost promote this at the top of the resume so that as they're scanning this like really jumps out at them of like computer vision using Google Cloud. Because both companies are going to care about that kind of stuff. Again, it depends on what kind of department you want an internship in and whether the department's doing computer vision and you know, this kind of like API calls, if they're even doing internships. If they are, I would put this link right at the top, and this would be the first thing I talk about in a cover letter is this particular project. An Android app that gives you recipes based on the ingredients you have left over. And so this almost feels like it should be a separate bullet point. Ingredient input can be given manually or using image recognition. That's kind of cool. Helped write the back-end code in Java for API calls to Google Cloud Vision as well as the recipe API. So again, I think you're missing a space in here. Helped write the back-end code. So that makes it sound like this was a group project. So I would want to see on here like this was a group project or a group of 6 people or something like that. If this was a hackathon like Hack Illinois, it looks like. If this was a group project or a hackathon project, how many people were on the team? And then I like that you're calling out like your responsibility on the team. Like as part of this app, I didn't actually do the Android part, but I worked on the back end and this is the part that I built. I like actually seeing that on a resume. It points out, it sort of sets my expectation that if I were to go look at your GitHub and look for this code, I could verify that yes, that's where you contributed the code. Zooey says, in 3 months after school for code assessments for interviews. Oh, like building out API endpoints. Yeah. Can't imagine doing it all the time on the daily. I mean, if that's your job, that's your job. You know, like Zooey, if I were to hire you as a back-end developer, I mean, that's mostly what you're going to be doing. You're going to be building services, and you're going to be kind of following like, hey, go build an API endpoint that takes this in as input, sends this back as output. The fact that this person's like new at this, you know, like if this was their first internship doing this stuff while they were getting their computer science degree, let's say that it was a 4-year degree. They did this in 2019, so halfway through their bachelor's in computer science. I have a really hard time believing that this was all of their individual effort in 4 weeks. Considering that their undergraduate doesn't mention anything at all about API development or service development, API development, you know, doing front-end development with React and Node. They don't actually mention any of that here. So I have a really hard time believing this was individual effort. This would be enough for me to just pass on the resume and say, no, I'm not even going to call them, because it feels like such an outlier that it doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel believable to me as a hiring manager. So, and then last one is Journal Launchpad. Is this supposed to be Launchpad, like LAUNCH pad? iOS app in Swift. Swift is a capital S. Again, make sure there's like good spacing. That puts up editable cards based on your location and the time spent at a particular location. So what I like to do with my projects is I like to write this out as like a user statement. Like users can, or like app allows users to track time spent at a location and create journal entries or something like that. Like, just tell me what the user does with this app. You're kind of explaining it, but it takes a minute for me to kind of piece it together and go, oh, it's a journaling app based on location. So like, make that much more concise. I would say like, if you can do that within like 10 to 15 words, that would be ideal. Like, user can write journal entries based on location. And that's all you need to tell me. Cards can be used to fill what was done, doesn't need to be capital F, at that location, and can be maintained at journal. I don't know what journal is. Is that like a separate service? Or are you like pushing this to like a external service or something? All cards are synced to Firebase, can be accessed by email and password using Google or Facebook login on any device. Okay, so you're doing Google and Facebook OAuth. So again, I would get these projects like up at the top of the resume, because you're using their APIs, you're using their OAuth, you're using their stuff. Get this stuff up at the top of like put it above your work experience in this case, because these are like really prominent. Either that or throw some bold on here, like Google Cloud, you know, throw a bold on that, and then like throw a bold on like Google, Facebook, OAuth, but actually call it like OAuth on here. But yeah, I would say like some of this stuff is not written very clearly. I think maybe a little bit of help on like the grammar and the sentence structure of what it is these apps are actually doing, just so it kind of gets that point across a little bit more. As far as the achievements go, I think some of this could be compressed up, certainly. Like this line could be up above, you know, up on this line. And then you've got this URL in here for Code Forces, which is this person's like competitive programming profile. But again, if you're going to put a link on here, like just make this like a clickable link, the same as you've done for like your GitHub and your LinkedIn up here where these are links. But also, if you're going to have a link on here that's in a different color, make these links different colors as well. I would just verify that they're like, these are actual clickable links. I already tried them. But if this link is going to be bright blue, make these links bright blue, like keep some consistency on there. Ranked 150 in Code Forces programming contest. Out of 10,000. Yep. Cool. Anyway, those would kind of be my first things. So yeah, like BK the Awesome is like pointing out like, you know, some of the spacing in here isn't good, like spacing between words and things like that. So again, just go through, highlight all this stuff, change the font, like make sure that there's only like a single space in between all the words, make it all the same size, make it all the same color, like standardize on all of that. and then go in afterward and then, you know, make these headings like slightly bigger. Like if this is 10-point font, make these headings like 12-point font. If this is 10-point font, I would guess this is more like 14, and that takes up a lot of room. It doesn't need to be that big. But I would also, again, I would reduce the amount of like class work that you're actually talking about on the resume, make more room for the actual skills, because you're also mentioning a lot of stuff over here like Swift that you don't mention over here. You know, it was an iOS development or an iOS app in Swift. You don't mention iOS at all. You mention Android and React Native, but React Native isn't going to be Swift. Or was that Swift on the back end? Like, because you can do like backend in Swift. So again, I think just more explanation around some of this. And then for things like React and Node, make sure it's like react.js and the JS is lowercase, node.js, JS is lowercase. You mentioned Node over here, you mentioned React, but again, you don't have the dots in here. So yeah, just being a lot more consistent about that kind of stuff. It will make a difference. Again, none of this is going to guarantee that you're going to get a phone call from Google or Facebook, but these are things that the recruiters are going to look at and they're like, eh. But I would definitely want to get some clarification around this point here. As a hiring manager, if this was submitted to me as an entry-level dev, I would look at that and go, I don't believe this, therefore I have a hard time believing a lot of other things on the resume. Like, that's enough to throw suspicion on your whole resume and make me just want to delete it outright, because you've put something on here that comes across as unbelievable, that a mid-degree, like middle of your degree time student who doesn't list any kind of experience before that or as part of your coursework that you've done API development, that you were able to build that much API development and front-end development in that amount of time. Just my opinion, just my thoughts on it. Cool. All right. Grammarly helped me a lot with spell check and other things. Yeah, for sure. I use Grammarly now as a plugin, and it's fantastic. Yeah, it's pretty great. I use it quite a lot. I guess it doesn't show up on the on OBS when I click it, but yeah, I use Grammarly like all the time now. It's pretty fantastic. Cool. Any other thoughts on this resume that anybody wants to share? Otherwise, I'll close it out and we'll kind of wrap that up there, and we'll get into like cover letter, or if other people just have other thoughts, questions, comments, funny stories, dad jokes. Happy to hear it. Otherwise, we'll move on from here. BK the Awesome says, I feel like it's overly crowded. Yes. And some people do that because there's so much content that they want to put on here. And again, I think if they remove some of the coursework stuff, or even just take all the coursework off, build up that skills block a lot more, I think it wouldn't feel as cramped. Also, with a single font size, like even like the font size of this text over here feels slightly bigger. Like if this is 10-point font, this is 9-point font, like visually to me, because I've got like a much bigger screen where I'm kind of blowing this thing up. There's a lot of font size, font style, font face, you know, different shades of, you know, black and white, and, you know, this heading is in gray, this text is in gray, but these links are like kind of a charcoal color. Like this stuff is like really sort of spread out, where other text is really compacted. So yeah, I would revamp all of this from a layout and styling point of view, just to make sure that it's readable. But then yeah, get some kind of grammar tool, spell check, make sure that you're naming your technologies correctly and things like that. Move the links up into the header with the contact info. Yeah, I would typically as well. But in this case, they wanted to really highlight their education. You know, I mean, recruiters, if they're going to contact you, you know, like I said, the email and the phone numbers up at the top, those are going to be the primary ways that they're going to contact you anyways. They're going to email you to set up a time, and then they're going to call that phone number. If they want to go look at your LinkedIn and your GitHub, like, you know, it's usually the hiring manager that may do that. Maybe the recruiter will look at your LinkedIn. The recruiter may not even bother looking at your GitHub. But your hiring manager will probably be looking at your GitHub just to kind of see what's on there. So yeah. Line spacing is not consistent. Word spacing isn't consistent. Font colors are not consistent. Yeah, there's a lot in here for sure from that point. And like I said, it feels a little petty to point that kind of stuff out. And so I'm not doing it to kind of be a jerk. I'm just saying, though, like, some people are going to look at the resume and go, this looks off. and not be able to explain why, but they're going to feel like it's not right somehow, and they're just going to pass on it. So it's better to like really curate it and really lay it out well. And if you're going for that internship with Google and Facebook, I would personally move these projects up here to the very top and like slap some bold on the words Google and Facebook, so that it really points out to them like, you know, I really want an internship. I've actually built some projects with your tools. I think it'll really, really stand out. All right, cool. I think that'll wrap that up. Thanks everyone else for your inputs and stuff in chat. I'll clip this out and I'll like isolate it on YouTube a little bit later on, and then I will contact them again over email and let them know a link of where to go find that. All right, so this is my new job board. So I moved from smarter.me. I basically so the smarter.me platform is like, it's kind of like a recruitment sort of thing that companies can use. And some of the jobs that I've applied for actually use that platform to actually go in and build the application. So I didn't delete like all of those current applications, but I wanted more columns than what they provided. If I go back over to smarter.me and go look at like the jobs where I've actually applied. My jobs, my apps. You could only list when you applied for a job, whether someone at the company has actually reviewed your application, and then you get to drag them into these other columns. You can only drag things that are not automated by their system. And so these 4 jobs were part of their platform, like the Smarter Recruiter sort of setup. So I can't move these. I can't drag them. Like I can't say, oh, I want this Square job more than I want the Shopify job. I can't drag it up there. All it does is highlight everything on the screen. Or if I know that an interview is coming up and like somebody didn't actually flag, like we are now going to interview Ian, I can't drag this over here myself. The only thing I can drag are jobs that I make, and I can prioritize those, and I can drag those from column to column. But these are also the only columns that they give you. So you've applied, it's been reviewed, you're actively interviewing, you get an offer, and then whether or not you got selected. And for me, that was a bit limiting. So what I did is I went over to Trello and basically said, well, these are companies that I like, and companies, you know, where I'm excited, but maybe later, like kind of like next pass sort of thing. And then these are jobs where I'm waiting on referrals, but I've got like resumes and things prepped. And then everything under here, I have a referral for, but I haven't actually applied to the job yet. In this case, somebody at Snap reached out and they're like, hey, I'll put in a referral at Snap, but they closed the referrals until January because they basically shut down all hiring over the holidays. So they're like, I'll hit you up January 3rd, we'll get that referral in. So I can kind of put in my own labels of like where I've progressed on things, and then these are jobs where I've actually applied. These are jobs where I have a phone screen coming up. These are jobs where I have like a technical screen of some kind. And then for the developer relations jobs, there's typically a presentation to put together. And so I wanted to have like multiple columns from there, and then like culture interviews and things like that. And then I get into like, this is where I'm expecting an offer or whatever. I can just flag it as, you know, I got rejected or, you know, decided not to move forward at some point. But I wanted more control over this. And I also built a rule on this one that actually alerted me in yellow, like, hey, you've got 4 things on here. Like, are you sure you want 4 things on here? Of course, one of them is the label. But I do have another tech screen coming up for WorkRamp, which is kind of a cool company. They do, it's like a learning management system, an LMS. And they've got like another technical phone screen coming up. And so I wanted to be able to like drag these things around myself, and I wanted to drag it myself from column to column, but I also wanted to alert myself like, hey, don't get too overloaded on your tech screens, don't get too overloaded on your presentations. And so I've got some rules and stuff built in there for those. Anyway, so I've got this referral for Peloton. So what I wanted to do, and I thought about doing this just privately, or if y'all want to help me do this on the stream, I've got like a giant block of notes that I kind of want to write into a cover letter to say like, hey, this is why you should call me. But because I match so much of the stuff from their job post, that cover letter is either going to be like 2 pages long, or it's just going to feel unbelievable like that other person's resume that we just looked at. And so I might need some of your opinions on what do I put in the cover letter based on their job post of the requirements and the qualifications. what do you think I should speak to? I'd be curious to get some of your thoughts and inputs on here. Zooey says, check out my last stream where I tailored my resume. So a week ago Tuesday, I did like a 6.5 hour stream where I put together like what I call my long form resume. It's got every job with tons of bullet points, every skill I've ever done, libraries that I've used, projects that I've worked on. It's got everything on there so that when I go apply for a job, I can trim it back down to like 1 or 2 pages and say, this is the most relevant information you need to know about me for this job. Makes it so much easier to have that really big resume with everything on it to trim back down later. So I make a copy and I trim that copy down. And now I've got a specialized resume just for that company. So yeah, I've got tons of YouTube videos on like how I do that. And then I did like the whole stream last week. I didn't put that stream on YouTube because it's 6.5 hours long and no one's gonna watch that. But what I could probably do is go through and like pick out all the bits and pieces, because I kind of whittled away at it over 6.5 hours, because I did like 2 resume reviews and there was lots of Q&A from Chad in there as well. I bet if I went and I grabbed just my stuff of how I built my resume and trimmed all that down, it would probably still be a 3-hour long video, because I went through and I really scrutinized on the wording of things and a bit about the layout on the page and things like that. It would still be like a 3-hour kind of video, but it goes into a lot of thought of like, this is why I want to word it this way. And there was one point on there, you know, by the end of the stream, people are like, do you really want to say that you managed and, you know, something about the software SDKs at streams? Like, well, I did kind of do the community management around the Go SDK, but I did contribute to the other one. So, but people are like, well, you say you managed and contributed, so which is it? It's like, well, I did both. And so we were trying to figure out like how should I actually word that on the page. I ended up just leaving it. So if people are curious about it, they'll ask in the interview, like, hey, could you explain this? And then I can explain it. So RC Maniac, good to see you in chat as well. Do I worry that prospective employers see who you are also considering? Nah, that's not a big deal. If anything, it'll hurry them up. Go, wow. Like if we go look at where I've applied, Stripe, Square, Shopify, another one at Shopify. So like all these e-commerce systems are like, oh, dang, we should like scoop this person up because they're applying at our competitor. And if we don't get them, they will. And then the Peloton one is also e-commerce, because I've got some e-commerce background. And so if anything, it's going to hurry them up. And so if I ever talk to the recruiters there, they'll say, where else are you interviewing? I'm going to mention all of their other competitors. I'm not going to tell them all of the jobs that I've applied to, but I am going to point out their competitors. For the other like DevRel jobs, I'm going to point out like 1 or 2 other DevRel kinds of jobs. There's one at Blues Wireless. It's kind of an interesting. It's like a cellular network connectivity like plugin that you can put into Internet of Things projects. It's like Raspberry Pis and Arduinos and other like types of circuits. They basically have like a cellular modem kind of thing that you can plug in, and you can like broadcast communications and so on. So it'd be good like if you're like a farmer and you want to do like a soil sample like 3 miles from your house, you don't have to run network cable out to your field and like trench it and hope you don't run over it with your tractor and all this stuff. You can just build up a little Raspberry Pi thing, go stick it out in your field with a solar panel, and it'll broadcast back to you. You know, stuff like that. And so that sounds pretty interesting, because I've got a firmware background. I understand the space. I do a lot of IoT. I've taught STEM classes, so I kind of built that into a cover letter and I sent that over to them. And I tailored the resume around like, hey, look at me, I'm a firmware developer and now I do developer relations, so I'm extra qualified for that job. So again, like having that really long resume with all of those projects and all those things I do, it made it really easy to trim that back down and look like a really good candidate for that job. So for the Peloton role, let's pull this up. So let's go look at their job post. And then these are the notes that I actually wrote about, like, based on the responsibilities that they had, as well as the bonus points as well. There's not going to be an easy way for me to split this on a screen, but I can kind of go back and forth a little bit. So when we look at the responsibilities here, I'll zoom in on it so you can actually read it. Lead by example, serve as a role model for the company by building a culture of learning, respect, transparency, and trust. Well, my point on that is I'm a people first kind of manager. Knowledge transfer is a big thing for me. Lots of one-on-ones with my team. Like I kind of talk about like these are things that I can do. part of writing this in here is so that when I'm actually doing an interview with them, I can actually have the notes on my screen right under my camera. So it looks like I'm looking at the camera, I'm looking at you, but I'm really reading the notes underneath my camera. It's kind of a little hack that I do when I'm doing interviews is I'll pull up the notes of things that I want to talk to right below my camera. So it looks like I'm looking at you, but I'm actually looking just slightly lower. And then if I'm kind of standing back a little bit, you can't even see that my eyes are going back and forth and reading the text. If the closer I get to the camera, the more you'd see that I'm actually like scanning the text and I'm reading it back to you. So just a little hack for that. But like these are the kinds of points that I want to talk to about what they have. Things that I do differently. Now there were a few things in the requirements that I don't have as far as the weakness goes. There was one on here. There was something in here about risk. Manage and identify organizational-wide risk. It's like, I've been a director of engineering, but I've never had something impact the entire organization as a responsibility of me and my team. I mean, I'm able to, do the dependency and the block removal and things like that as part of like our stand-up process and part of our open communication as a team. Like I can speak to that part of it, but I've never actually done something that was like an organization-wide risk of like, if this falls apart, like the whole company is doomed. Now, the work that I did at Rubicon, it was kind of like that because the code that I was working on at Rubicon, it was business critical. If my code didn't work, we didn't know what ad to show, and then we were like showing ad impressions too many times or to the wrong people, and so it really messed things up. And so my code had to be like bulletproof. That's why I wish really, really hard I could go back in time and like teach my former self about test-driven development. It would have made my life a lot easier. Deliver top of funnel, engagement personalization features that drive higher purchase intent. Again, this is something that I kind of identified as a bit of a risk. Like I've never had that responsibility. So if I'm managing the team that's building the e-commerce side of this, we need to make it sticky, and we need to really you really need to buy this thing. Like this is how it's going to work. To me, that feels more like a marketing effort as opposed to me and my engineers. Like you tell us what you want us to build, we'll go build it. It's up to the marketing team and the graphics and whatever to like really compel you. Because the whole thing about like marketing and sales is like they're selling you a better version of yourself, right? That's the whole idea around like marketing and sales. But that's kind of out of our control as engineers. Like we don't do that in the industry. Like we write the code to make sure that e-commerce is always going to work, but we're not necessarily like we can go build the personalization features, but you need to tell us what to go build. Like, is it going to be my job to think of those personalization features? Because that feels more like a product decision, not an engineering decision. So I might kind of point that out if it ever comes like, hey, tell us about the responsibilities, like tell us about this. I might say like, you know what, I've worked with a lot of product teams and marketing teams where they were working on those kinds of features that they wanted us to build. And occasionally I had to push back and say like, we're not going to build it that way because that was going to be too complex, and like talk about how we're going to personalize things. But I haven't had like a great deal of experience. And so this point and the manage organization-wide risk, I can't really speak to. But I've literally got stories about all of the rest of this just as the responsibilities. And then getting into the qualifications, like I've got more than a decade of experience building scalable stuff. I've got more than 5 years of managing and leading teams. So like I could point those things out as, in my cover letter, but I've got like all these notes that I could kind of compact down into a cover letter. I'm trying to figure out like, what would you do for a job post? Like, how would you start breaking this down and go, these are the things I want to talk about in a cover letter? I'm kind of curious what some of you think. I've got opinions, but that's why I run a stream like this. And so I've got ideas about like which of these are going to be more important to talk about from an engineering manager point of view that the company is going to care about more in a cover letter to go, dang, we need to call this person. Because I also need to tailor the resume according to what I'm going to kind of pick out of here for the cover letter as well. I want to make sure that it really highlights those things, and not just be a resume of like, I managed here, I managed here, I managed this many people, I did this and this. Like I want to be able to, I want them to look at the resume and look at the cover letter and go, yeah, this all fits together. And like I might have to reword some bullet points and whatever, but that's basically going to be my job for tonight, is to put all this stuff together so that it's ready to give to my referral tomorrow morning. Because I promised it to them, even if they're not going to get the referral in right away. But I promised I would have it done over the weekend. So, this is tough, itemizing each one. Well, yes, but at the same time, like these are things that are important enough to them to put into a job listing and say, this is what we're looking for in a leader. And so it is a lot to say you've got that much just as responsibilities, and then you've got that much more for qualifications, and then you've got a bunch of bonus points of like, do I enjoy tech talks, lunch and learns, geeking over programming languages, architecture, design patterns? Like I taught all this stuff, design sprints, whatever topic you're passionate about. Like, do I enjoy speaking about technical topics? Yeah, I've been developer relations, I've gone to tech conferences, I've given talks. Like I can definitely talk about that. Attend meetups, conferences, participate in software engineering communities. Yeah, I do that. Contribute to open source projects. Not as much recently, but I have, yes, absolutely. And I've started some of my own, and I've open sourced my own projects. Do I have a hobby project I can demonstrate? Yeah, let me tell you about this video slicer that I make for my live stream. Like I can totally demo all of that. So like there's so much stuff here. Like I like to invent and on behalf of customers. I love prototyping things. I did pre-sales engineering. I've been in developer relations where I was like coming up with prototype code to get people started on our stuff. Data driven. Yeah, I'm a very data driven like manager. Like I look at the data of how my team is performing, and then I'll sit down and I'll talk to them about all that stuff. Like I can literally talk and like give stories about all of this stuff, but it's going to be really overwhelming to put that into a single cover letter. So typically what I would do, how I would put a cover letter together, is I would look at what are the real responsibilities of a director. In this case, they're looking for someone who has managed managers and like a larger team sort of scope. I have done that. I have collaborated with team members from product design and marketing. I have done that. In this kind of director role, that collaboration is going to be really important. Define and deliver technical roadmap for multiple quarters, like projection ahead of like this. These are the things we want to build, and this is how we're planning it out. Yes, I have done that with a team, not alone, because no one should ever like sit down and dictate this is what we're doing for the year. I want my team's input on what's actually feasible in the year. What, like, based on your experience already on the team and things that you've built, what order do we need to do these things in? Maybe we can't upgrade the database until this other thing gets done, or we can't do that other thing until that database work gets finished. And so we have to like plan out in order, like this is the order that things are going to happen. Yes, I've done that. Several jobs. Align our technology with the goals of the business. I mean, what technology we use, yeah, it will depend a little bit because it's the little stationary bike with the screen, and so the technology we use has to work on that screen. So yeah, we'll figure out the best scenario there. We can figure that out. But again, this is just the e-commerce side. So I've never used a Peloton bike, so I don't know whether like someone can sit down while they're on the bike and go, I want to upgrade and like do, upgrade something about their account or like buy some new background image or something. I don't know if they can do that on the bike. So I don't know exactly how some of that technology is going to come into play. But that's where some research about the company would really be beneficial. So that's also part of my work tonight, to try to figure out, okay, what are the actual capabilities of the bike? Are there YouTube reviews and videos on like how to actually use the bike that can show off the e-commerce side of it, so that I get a better idea of what's already there to say, yeah, this would be, some points that I would talk about in the interview, or talk about how my background and experience aligns with that. I worked in e-commerce where they would see a catalog of things and they could go through and like search for things, and it would figure out the best thing to show them based on a search term. I've done all that. So yeah, like I've got so much stuff here that I can speak to, but I need to figure out what's going to be more important for them about this. The fact that the first 2 points alone were just about the team. You're leading by example, you're coaching, you're mentoring your team. Those are the first 2 things that they list. That tells me that the company really cares about how you lead the team and how you take care of the people on the team. The product and marketing stuff and the team collaboration around like get your team to build what we want is bullet point number 5. It's like way down the list. So yeah, I've done that, but maybe I don't emphasize that as much in the cover letter because it was quite a ways down the list. Companies actually scrutinize these lists. It's not just, oh, think of this, think of this, think of this. Oh, we should add that to the list. I mean, they're going to go through and go, which of these things are actually more important to us as a company? And these lists, similar to how I tell people to write like bullet point lists on a resume, the most important stuff is generally like going to bubble up to the top. So align our technology with the goals of the business and strategic objectives. The e-commerce thing is going to be a big deal. Like, yeah, they're selling the bike, but they're also selling lots of upgrades and add-ons and like features of like how to use the bike. Like I said, I've never actually used one, so I don't know what those capabilities are. I'm about to go learn. And then I will speak to that, because again, those are the 3 top sort of bullet points. And then I'll kind of touch base on some of these other things, and that'll be kind of, you know, wrapping up part of that paragraph. And then my intro paragraph is going to talk a lot about my qualifications. So again, the first 5 points. I've been in the industry for 25 years. I've been a manager or lead for over 10 years. Modern front-end technologies? Nope, haven't got that one. So if I come over and look at my weakness, I don't have React. I'm just starting to learn React. I just signed up for a Udacity class last week. Actually built my first React. It was like a tic-tac-toe game. It was the React tutorial on how to do tic-tac-toe, and it was fun to go through. I'm like, cool, I get it. I like how that works. I appreciate how that works, but I've never used React. Building high-performant, user-friendly experiences. I'm not a front-end developer, so this whole bullet point is not going to be part of my introduction. I'm not going to highlight, oh, by the way, I know this is a qualification, but I don't have that skill. If they ask me in the interview, what kind of experience do you have? I'm going to say, I've built out scalable backends. I've worked on e-commerce systems. I've built APIs for microtransactions. I'm not going to say a thing about front-end development because I haven't got it. And hopefully they'll figure out by me not saying it that I do not have that skill. Subject matter expertise on e-commerce. Nope, don't have that. I'm not a subject matter expert on it. But if I get the job, I'm going to become that subject matter expert. I have background in e-commerce, but I am not a subject matter expert. But that's okay. I'm leading the team to go build the things. So I will figure out, based on working with the product team and the marketing team, like how do you want us to actually build this stuff and sell this stuff? I will figure out with my team, how do we need to make that happen? Do we put a QR code that they scan with their phone and that actually makes the purchase? Do we somehow have them add like a credit card to their account, so while they're tapping on the screen, they just say like, go buy that thing, and it just sort of happens? Do we let them use cryptocurrency, whatever? Like, I don't know. Depends what the company wants to do. We'll go build it. You tell us what to build, we'll go build it. So again, there are a couple of things on here that I can't speak to. I'm just not going to talk about them at all. You don't want to highlight what you don't bring to the team. You want to, the cover letter is like, this is what I bring. This is what I have as my skill base. I don't have all of the things, but I've got a lot of the stuff. Agile, Lean, DevOps, I've done all that. I taught Agile. I utilize Lean at several companies, which is basically like figure out your process and then take out things that don't work. Strong project management skills. I had to do that with students for 4 years. I did that for several jobs prior to that. Ability to scope and assess the risk of things. We did a whole project inception process from a company called Pivotal Labs. They have this whole thing called Inception, where they sit down and they identify like, these are all the things that we need to build. And as part of that, you identify the risks of what don't we know, what technologies are we being asked to use that we have no familiarity with, what are those risks? And then people get to vote on like, which of those risks are like deal breakers, which of those risks are things that, you know, before we start any of this work, we need to go research this risk to find out whether it's going to be a deal breaker or whether, you know, we just don't have somebody that knows that language or that kind of thing, or we don't have any infrastructure that can handle that kind of thing. Identify that as a risk, solve that, and then we can kind of pick up with everything else. So that's all part of that inception process. So yeah, I can talk to a lot of these things. excellent communication, listening, collaboration skills. Done tons of that as manager, lead dev, building up that trust on the team. Strong customer obsession. This sounds very much like one of the Amazon, what do they call them, leadership principles. So as I was kind of going through and looking at this job post, a lot of things kind of jumped out at me around the Amazon leadership principles, which I just put like 30 hours of prep work into to try to study and get through that interview. So a lot of that stuff's already on my mind about like, oh yeah, everything for the customer. Like whatever it takes, we're going to get it done for the customer. We're going to prototype, we'll get it out quick. If it doesn't work, we'll roll it back. Like whatever we can do to really excel for the end user. That's what we want to do. Earn trust with your team. Yep, I can do that. Stakeholders, I've done that. You listen, you're inclusive. Am I inclusive? Heck yeah, let me tell you all about my DEI training and how much that matters to me and how I don't want to just be a white dude on the internet doing things. Like I want other voices. I want other perspectives. It is absolutely imperative that we do that in tech. So yeah, got that in spades. Treat others with respect. Yeah. Vocally self-critical all the time. All the time. Hire and develop the best. I've done tons of hiring. Coaching your team, developing leaders. Developing leaders is a lot of like, let me tell you how I would do it. You can ultimately make your own decision. This is my process. But also like lots of books. I've got like a whole like catalog of like manager books and leadership books and stuff like that I've gone through, and even more that I've asked for Christmas. That my wife accidentally bought me one and sent it to my Kindle before the holidays. So I got the notification. Now I, open up my Kindle app and there's this book that I wanted. Oops. Demonstrated track record of hiring strong, diverse talent. Well, I haven't done hiring in 5 years, so I don't have a recent track record of this. But at Simple Energy, I did. I had all kinds of different people, different walks of life, and same at SendGrid. So yeah, moving them through the organization. Yeah, many of those people that I hired at SendGrid are now in like upper management roles or doing like really great things or authoring books like my friend Sylvia. So yeah, again, I can demonstrate a lot of this stuff, but like how do you pack all this into a cover letter that's only going to be 3 paragraphs long? Well, I'm not going to talk about all of this stuff. I'm going to talk about like the first couple of points on here that are the most relevant about my background and my experience. And so for me, I look at the qualifications and go, this needs to be my introduction. And then the requirements and the responsibilities of the job, this is going to be paragraph number 2 of like, this is how I do these things according to your job post. Now, you don't ever say like, according to the job post, you want this skill and I have that skill. It's meant to be more conversational about, this is what I do as a manager, this is what I do as a lead, blah, blah, blah. And talk about that kind of stuff in paragraph 2. And then paragraph 3 is going to be why I want to work at Peloton. And, the stuff that I've learned about the company and the mission and things like that, and why getting back into the e-commerce realm is important to me. I want to get into more modern financial technology or fintech. It's a big thing that's going to lead so much content out there. It's been a big part of purchasing content for all kinds of things, whether it's a live stream, little plug-in widget of like, hey, I got a follower and it plays some little guitar riff, or paying for a layout like I've got here in OBS for like these little windows, like paying for that content, like a couple of bucks here, a couple of bucks there. The very first year that Zynga made microtransactions for like Farmville or something back in the day, if anybody is old enough to remember Farmville, they made $100 million the first year. Tiny little company. They made $100 million the first year they did microtransactions, where it's like, yeah, you want to pick those carrots a little faster? Cost you $1. Or for $1, we're going to give you like this in-game currency, and you can spend some of that currency to like, harvest those carrots a little bit early or something like that. They made $100 million. And that kicked off into like billions of dollars worth of industry now for content creators, or like content creation, as well as just having content available, just generally speaking on the internet. Whether it's paywalls or subscriptions and all that kind of stuff. Like it drives so much of the internet now. So yeah, I can speak to a lot of this stuff. Anyway, kind of yattered on here for a while about all that. BK the Awesome says, I've been in the job search for a couple of months. Personally, recruiters barely read my resume, let alone a cover letter. I would make it brief and shorter, yeah. Make a star-style use case. That'd be a good idea. But again, because the cover letter has to be so short, doing like a whole star kind of thing is really, like that would take an entire paragraph. And so I would have to try to think of like, is there a way that I could talk about these first couple of like core responsibilities in that second paragraph and just frame it in a star, like, you know, as a manager, this is what I handled, this is what I was tasked with, this was, you know, kind of what I did about it, and this was the result. I could do that. I think it would be more impactful to actually be able to speak to more of these things in a separate sentence each. Like, this is the background I have. I lead by example, you know, and try to model and emulate, you know, what others should do as I coach other leadership and groom other people to get into more of those lead roles and manager roles, and just explain more of that in the cover letter, as opposed to like really shaping it out in a more strict term. When you're in the interview, absolutely, STAR method is great. Carmelo says, seems like you can just talk through it instead of putting it in a cover letter. So statistically, so this is something that I've talked about on the stream in the past. Now I'll shut off the other screen here. One thing that I've talked about in the past is getting into the statistics of how many recruiters or how many hiring managers actually read cover letters. In the past, it used to be about 30 to 35% of people actually read a cover letter. With the pandemic, because people are more remote and they have maybe a little more time, and there's not like the bustle and the interruptions and the distractions of actually being in an office, over the pandemic, some people researched it and they said more like 70 to 80% are actually reading cover letters now. But yes, I do know recruiters are like, I don't care about cover letters. But for the recruiters that do want a cover letter, do you really want to start that relationship by disappointing them and not giving them a cover letter? In this case, it's actually going to take me a while to craft a cover letter. Usually my cover letters take 5 to 10 minutes because I kind of copy and paste stuff about being a contributor, being in developer relations work. But it's been a while since I've written a cover letter for a director level role. My last 2 director level roles, I got kind of by conversation and said, yeah, okay, come join the team. And so they weren't like full blown applications and things like that. And my job at Rubicon, when I was like managing managers, the managed teams and so on, I was kind of promoted internally into that role. And so I didn't have to apply for it. And so I've never had to write a cover letter to get a director level role. And so this is kind of new territory for me to like sit down and think about, like, let's go like really scrutinize this job post. Let's figure out what I need to talk about and get that shaped up, and then also craft a resume to go with it. Do I like the Udacity course? Yeah, I've started several and then stopped them because they do get expensive. But you can find lots of coupon codes online to like cut the price in half. In my case, they actually gave me a 75% discount. So instead of $400 a month, I'm paying like $100 a month for the React course. The reason that I do that is because there's financial incentive to like get through it quickly and not procrastinate. Otherwise, it's going to cost me hundreds of dollars to do. But it's very regimented curriculum, and there are deadlines and due dates. And for someone who has like mild neurodivergence and recently diagnosed with ADD, it's important for me to have a schedule of like, okay, that project is due, you know, right before New Year's. So I got to get cracking on that thing. I got to get through the lessons. I got to understand it enough to go build that thing because I have a due date. Where when it's like free code camp, you know, they've got all kinds of React material. I could just go learn that and get their little certificate. But because it's self-paced and nobody's actually grading anything to say like, oh, you know, you could have done this a little bit better, so I'm actually not going to pass the project until you go fix that. Well, now I've got incentive to go fix it instead of just like, you know, saying, yeah, I built a project, it kind of worked, it's a little janky and it may not be the best code. By having a professional reviewer from Udacity, that's part of what you're paying for, is they turn around, they pay people to actually mentor and help with the code quality and what you actually build. Farmville stopped in 2020. They finally stopped it, did they? That's funny. And so they actually have people that help mentor about your projects and how to improve them and how to look at the quality of your code and things like that. And so you actually get pretty good code reviews from the people on Udacity. So I like it. As a hiring manager, if I see a nano degree on there, because I've done some of it, it's like, okay, that's actually like solid effort. Like if you actually made it through and got that nano degree, I know that you actually worked through some projects. You probably worked through some code review. You've had people look at your LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. And you've got a pretty good sense of like what you want to do as a developer or whatever. And so I look at Udacity as like, yeah, all right, it's a certificate. You've learned a thing, you've accomplished a thing. Okay. Some people look at it and go, so you took a course. like big deal. And for some, it is a big deal, you know, with the expense of it and the time investment, you know, 10 hours a week or whatever. I could spend 10 hours a week and just self-learn. Am I going to learn the right way? Am I going to follow kind of the right tutorials? Or am I going to be kind of scattered? Like me personally, I need a curriculum to follow. And I need a project that I can do the project and hand it in and get feedback on that project. And not just, I built a project, you know, and it works. Like it followed everything they wanted, but I didn't get any feedback on it. Like nobody told me whether it was good or bad code. So, you know, as a developer, I want someone to give me feedback on that stuff. So that's why I wanted to do something where it was paid and I was going to get feedback. So that's why I went with Udacity. Bootyman, good to see you in chat. I'm a little against microtransactions. A lot of ways it feels like it has some of the similar negative traits of gambling and can harm people. Yeah, a lot of games actually do. They play on the psychology of like feeling of missing out, or FOMO as we call it. And they really play on like, oh, this is a time limited thing. If you don't buy it, if you don't do this, like if you can't log in and play this event, you know, and you don't buy it, then you just miss out on like that new character, that new spaceship, or that new upgrade or whatever. And a lot of games really do. And it's not just the microtransaction, it's actually the game mechanics and how they market it to make you feel like you're missing out on something, to entice you to do it. So it's not the microtransaction itself. I mean, companies can't just give everything away for free. They've got to make money too, and that's one of their biggest money makers is the microtransactions, especially on mobile games, because you're not going to convince somebody to go buy a mobile game for $50. But over the course of, you know, a year or two, if you do a really good job with enticing them into buying those microtransactions, you might get that $50 out of them over a couple of years. But you're probably not going to get them to pay for the game up front. You want to make it like free to play and then like entice them over time, like, hey, go buy this thing, it's only $1. And then you buy that and they're like, hey, go buy this thing, it's only $5. You know, and they start ramping it up. I did that in one game where it's like, hey, buy this thing for $1, and then the next thing was $5, and then the next thing was $10. And then I bought the $10 thing and they're like, hey, by the way, we got this super pack for like $100. I'm like, who's gonna buy $100 thing in a video game? Like, that's ridiculous. I could go buy like 3 other video games for $100. Ended up buying a lot of that stuff anyway, but yeah, you have to be really careful about that kind of stuff. Like there's a game that I play. It's a Marvel like superhero game. I forget what it's called now. I should remember because I play it a lot. Anyway, some Marvel game. They are constantly coming out with new content, and they're constantly like, oh, you got to buy this thing. It's the next like big thing to get through that raid or to get through that next section of the game. And if you don't buy it, you're kind of stuck. And you got to wait till the next time it comes around. And so, yeah, they do play a lot on the psychology of that kind of stuff. But that's what I was going to talk about. So there was actually like a YouTube video where they had interviewed someone that had spent like $40,000 or $50,000 on that game. Marvel Strike Force is what it's called. They'd paid like tens of thousands of dollars to buy stuff in this game, and they're like no better off than people that play for free that have been playing for like 4 years in this game. But this person came in and just started dropping money in ridiculous quantities, and so yeah, now you're all caught up with all the other people that have been playing for 4 years. But so what, you know? And so it's kind of disappointing to hear those kinds of stories. But you know, some people, like, that's how they want to spend their money. It's like, that's fine. I'd rather put mine in a retirement account and get ready to retire in another 15, 20 years. So anyway, the only microtransactions I accept are cosmetic. Oh, like cosmetic things, and not like, oh, you got to pay for that new character. It's like pay for like a new skin on the character or something. It's known that even in free-to-play games that there are whales. Yeah, we call them whales, or krakens is what they call like the next level up. Like people that are like super heavy spenders, they call them krakens. And in Marvel Strike Force, the people that buy like the $1 things, they call them like dolphin snacks or something like that. So you're either a dolphin snack, or you're a whale, or you're a kraken. It's kind of like how they talk about it in this Marvel Strike Force game. But anyway, cool. I've been going for almost 2 hours. Time flies in a hurry. That resume review took a little longer than I had expected, but yeah, I gotta go spend some time on this Peloton thing. I gotta get this stuff ready to go for the morning. So I'm gonna have like a nice healthy snack. I'm gonna continue to drink my water. I haven't had enough water yet today, so my voice is already starting to get a little raspy. going at this for 2 hours. I really appreciate everybody that dropped by. So much stuff going on in chat tonight. I really appreciate that. Who's the recruiter for Peloton? So like it's just Peloton. This is a job post that Peloton put out. I have a number of so a bunch of instructors that I worked with at Turing work there, and a bunch of my students from Turing work there, and a bunch of students that went through the front end program also work there as well. And they're all kind of on different teams. They're not all part of necessarily this e-commerce team, but a person who used to be an instructor at Turing where I taught, they work on the e-commerce team as a developer. And so I would actually be the boss of their boss, because they're looking for a director over a couple of managers, and then June works for one of those managers. So I would be like June's like upper management basically. But June's an amazing guy. I really like June. Cool. Anyway, we'll see how all that plays out. And there's never a guarantee with these things that, you know, you're going to get the job, or, you know, it's going to pan out the way you expect. Like, there's never a guarantee. But I'm going to apply for it. I'm going to go for it, and we'll see what happens. Asked because there was a recruiter I dealt with who ghosted me twice. The same recruiter? Yeah, I wouldn't have worked with them the second time. If they reached out a second time, I'd be like, hey, go answer that last email I sent you, and then I'll talk to you about like maybe taking another job. It stinks that they ghosted. That's no fun. In this case, because I've got several people inside the company that can go vouch for me and you know, bug HR on my behalf, I have a feeling that, you know, I may not get ghosted. I may not get the job, but at least they're gonna like call me about it and not just like disappear in the wind. My hope anyway. Cool. Thanks for the follow. The boss. The boss. Cool. Cool spelling on the name. Welcome to the channel. I was actually just getting ready to close down, but if anybody else has other like questions, anything like that about interview prep, career prep, resumes, anything like that, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit. I never want to like jump off in a hurry, but if folks have questions, let me know. Oh, Camilla, you did get the package. Cool. I just got your whisper on Twitch. I'm glad you actually got it. I'm glad it made it all the way there. So you can open it on Christmas. Great. Can't wait to see what you think. Definitely message me, whisper me, or like post a thing on Twitter or something like that. Let me know what you think. RC Maniac says, I applied the first time. Different recruiter said they knew other roles I could do, and then connected me to this other recruiter who was the same recruiter who ghosted me again. Oh, I got you. Okay. Yeah, it stinks when that happens. Like, ghosting is like the biggest problem next to the fact that the interview process itself is really broken. I was talking to one company. So my friend Josh that I had on the stream a couple of weeks back and from HR, and we were kind of bouncing the resumes back and forth. He referred me to a job, and I always ask in that first introduction call, like, what's your interview process like? You know, is there like a lot of steps? And they're like, well, you know, we've just had this sort of technical phone screen. I like talking to you. We'll probably do like an actual like code challenge of some kind, and then we'll make you an offer. I'm like, one round? That's it? Like one phone screen and then one technical challenge, and then like maybe make me an offer on that. It's like the shortest interview process ever, which would be pretty fantastic. I did have a friend reach out, and they're like, hey, you know, I've got this like upper management role. Like, we could maybe talk next week about like making a role for you here if, you know, you want to get into this kind of realm or that kind of realm. I'm like, you're just gonna make me a role? Like, that's pretty amazing. So we'll see what happens with that one. That one would actually be pretty cool. But yeah, lots of other developer relations roles. That's kind of the big thing that I'm really pushing for right now, is developer relations kind of role. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that I've at least applied to. Some of them are already in the works. One of them I'm waiting to find out about a technical screen. Another one that I'm waiting. I've got 1, 2 more that I've applied to that I haven't heard from yet. And I've got like 1 or 2 other roles that are all developer relations that I'm going to apply to like when I get a referral. So yeah, developer relations is like the #1 thing on my list right now. But I've also got like a couple of these management roles. Handshake was also going to be another cool one. They basically help college students get jobs. But it was like all students, not just tech centric. So that would be kind of interesting, because I'm going to talk all about this stream if I get that interview process. Like, hey, go check out my YouTube thing. This is what I'm all about, is like helping people get jobs. So I don't know, we'll see. The boss says 1 round. Wow. Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, technically the phone screen was 1 round, and then like the actual code challenge would be 1. And it did kind of sound like that code challenge was going to be like multiple parts. Like there's going to be some back end and some front end. And I'm like, I can already tell you the front end part I'm not going to do well because I don't know React. And they're like, yeah, but it's all about your process of like, how would you go figure out how to do that? It's like, all right, I could do that. At least show them that process. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that one might end up being more of a manager role. So I don't know. We'll see. Handshake, my mentor from one of my internships is there. Oh, cool. Yeah. Handshake actually seems like a pretty legit company. And then the LMS is WorkRamp. That one would be more of a contributor role. They're looking at a full stack developer for that job. And that came through hired.com. So I put a profile on hired.com, and I got reached out to by a bunch of companies, and I walked away from 4 of them because their engineering teams were 100% male. I'm like, no, not interested. Like, your company says you want, you believe in diversity, but you're not practicing it. So I walked away. And WorkRamp actually has like a really good diversity, like across the whole company, but also on the engineering team. Lots of gender representation, lots of ethnic representation. I'm like, that's amazing. So I actually pointed that out to the recruiter, like the very first phone call. I'm like, by the way, did some homework on your company. Love this about your company. And they're like, thanks. We really take that seriously. I'm like, me too. They're like, that's good to know. All right. So yeah, it's really near and dear to me about that. So we'll see. RC Manic says, I used Hired to try to get jobs. I was literally typing Hired when I mentioned it. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a pretty good platform. You have to, again, kind of plant some psychology a little bit about like what it is you're looking for. And you have to like look really enticing as far as your skill set in order to get into those interviews. They had a top list of employers. Yeah. I don't always trust those lists of top employers though, because some of those companies are like, hey, if you pay us a couple of $1,000s, we'll put you on this list. Or like, hey, if you contribute to this thing, we'll add you to this list of like top employers in Colorado, kind of thing. And usually the more you donate, the higher up on the list you get. So it has nothing to do with like how your employees actually rank you. It's how much money you pay to be on that list. Take a look at this list here real quick. It's top employers. They look at equity, efficiency, transparencies. Number 1 is Octane, never heard of it. Devitry I've heard of. It's a really good company. I've got lots of students that work at Devitry. Was number 2 on the list. Number 3, number 4, never heard of. Number 5, never heard of. Number 6, never heard of. I've heard of Ritual, which is number 8. I've heard of Storyblocks, number 9. So I've heard of 3 companies on their top 10. I just never heard of most of these. Those are the top 10s. Oh, small employers. Devitry's not that small. Medium-sized employers. Sitter City, never heard of it. BarkBox, never heard of it. Ripple, I've heard of. Amplify, I've heard of. Vistaprint, everybody's heard of. Well, I shouldn't say everybody, but if you've ever gotten like a printed mug or a T-shirt, you've heard of Vistaprint. ZocDoc, never heard of. HubSpot, I've heard of. Zendesk, I've heard of. 2U Incorporated, Chegg, SquareTrade, I've heard of, but I've heard of like maybe half of that list. Top 10 Enterprise, Insider, never heard of it. Maximus, I've heard of. Nielsen, I've heard of. Walmart, Disney, Accenture, Cisco Labs, Meta, American Express, Cisco, Capital One, Wayfair. So there's like 1 company on here that I've never heard of. Or 2 maybe, Insider and Maximus. I don't know that I've heard of them. So yeah. Midnight Simon, good to see you in chat, bud. How's it going? First time chat from Midnight Simon. Midnight Simon's getting ready to make those Google dollars pretty soon. Simon, do you start that job tomorrow? Isn't it like really soon that you start that job, or was it last week that you start that job? I forget, but I know it's like really soon. It's going pretty good. So you've already been there. That's awesome. So Midnight Simon did like a serious leak code grind for like 150 days. And like as soon as they got contacted by the recruiter, they started grinding on leak code and was streaming for like a couple of hours every night and put in the work, put in the effort for sure. And it paid off. Got that Google job. So good job. RC Maniac back in a bit, making a late dinner, no worries. I'm actually going to hop off the stream here pretty soon. I've been going for a little over 2 hours, and I got to finish up this application for Peloton. So yeah, so Midnight Simon, we're just chatting a little bit about different like jobs that I'm applying to in developer relations roles and a couple of management roles and stuff like that. So just chatting a little. So we were kind of looking over the job post for Peloton and talking about like, I've got I match so much stuff on this list for this director of engineering role. And like, how do I make sure that my cover letter is not overwhelming but also not unbelievable by making it concise? So I want to entice them to call me, and then hopefully I don't, scare them away. Like, this guy thinks he's got all this stuff on the list. I actually do have most of the stuff on their requirements and kind of the job description and stuff like that. I've actually got a lot of experience in. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I am really hoping for a developer relations job, but if that one makes it all the way through and I get a job offer from them, it might be hard to say no. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. DevRel sounds sick. Yeah, I really like DevRel. I love like getting out and like teaching people about things, and then like watch them go do something cool and know that, oh, look at what Simon made. I had a part in that. I had like a tiny little part in that. Makes me feel good. Not from like a pat myself on the back point of view, but just like, I know that I contributed in some small way. I tell people on the stream, like, the chances that I go invent something that literally changes the world, like a Twitter or a Google, pretty small. Like, pretty small chance that that's going to happen. But I can change the world by changing your world. And then watch you go do something, and that impacts the world, and that changes something, and that impacts the world to change something. So I change the world by changing your world. And that's kind of the attitude that I've had as a teacher, as a mentor of, I'm not going to do anything like earth-breaking and like, total, like, go move a mountain kind of thing. But I can have an impact in some small way, and then watch that impact have a bigger impact, and have that make a bigger impact, and so on. So that's how I tend to think of, sharing my knowledge. But if we all share our knowledge, then you can kind of think of it like throw a handful of gravel in the water and you watch all the ripples, and then you watch those ripples interact and how those make even bigger ripples when those things collide. And so by having a bunch of us in the community where we're all sharing our knowledge and we're all helping each other, has a much, much bigger impact for sure. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. We'll see. Different Ghost, good to see you in chat for the first time. Senior software at Nerdy. Cool. Missed most of the stream. Yeah, no worries. At Nerdy, I've heard of Nerdy. Where do I know the name? I need to go look that up. But yeah, my whole stream is basically like, how can I help other people get better at interviews? So the interview process is broken. The hiring process is better, but it's still kind of broken. Still a lot of bias going on. So how do we get through that? How can I help people get into the tech industry? Whether it's resume reviews, talk about cover letters, show people like, this is how I'm going through a job hunt myself right now. These are things that I'm facing and things that I have to consider when I write cover letters and resumes and all kind of stuff. Transforming learning, connecting learners to experts. Oh, yeah. I've heard of Nerdy. Connecting learners and experts in 3,000 plus subjects. Curated platform for live online learning. That's cool. Is it like one-on-one coaching, or is it just like pre-recorded stuff? I'm a little bit curious now in Different Ghost. If it's live coaching versus just like pre-recorded classes. Personalized learning. It leverages AI to personalize the experience for learners of all ages, from kindergarten to professional, and academic, test prep, enrichment, and certification. Extensive data set machine learning algorithms enable us to find the exact right expert for a given learner's needs. So it sounds like a one-on-one coaching. Yeah, one-on-one coach. Cool. So I was actually part of Google Helpouts back in the day. If you've ever heard of Google Helpouts, they were basically mashing together like Google Hangouts as well as like Google Calendar, but also a payment platform of like, go hire a one-on-one coach for a particular topic. And it lasted about a year and a half, and Google shut it down because they didn't have good enough engagement. What they found by surveying people was that there was a misunderstanding and like a mismarketing where people signing up for the platform were expecting pre-recorded videos and not like, oh, I want to go watch Ian's video Tuesday night at 7, and then I get down there, I'm like, hey, I'm Ian, what's going on? And they're like, oh, this is live. It's like, yeah, what do you want to learn? Because I was teaching programming, I was teaching Agile, I was teaching like API development, I was teaching test-driven development. I had like 6 or 7 different classes that I was teaching. But people thought it was all just pre-recorded and that it wasn't actually live coaching. So it's cool that, there are more platforms kind of popping up for that, for people that actually want live one-on-one coaching. Especially if you can focus on different learning styles and understanding like how different age groups learn differently, and how to sort of present content in different ways. You know, for people where English isn't their native language, you want to talk slower and not use contractions. For people with vision problems, you also want to do the same so that, you know, captioning systems can more clearly recognize your voice and do like proper grammar structure and things like that, so you don't have to have somebody like live typing while you talk, you know, all that kind of stuff. So you work with tutors. You're actually having a lot of no-shows with tutors. That's too bad. Interesting market, yeah. For the top 10 list, I use those kinds of things to find companies, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Companies who make products and services I use, companies I know, people, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm a big fan of like LinkedIn to do like company research and find out like, do I know anybody at that company? So yeah, speaking of LinkedIn, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. Send me a connection request. Don't just follow me on LinkedIn. Send me a connection request. Let me know you saw me on the stream. And if there are people I can introduce you to, I'm happy to do that. Happy to help people out in the industry. If I can make introductions and like speed something up for you about getting a new job in tech, absolutely. Please contact me on LinkedIn. Cool. All right, well, let's see who else is streaming tonight. A couple of music folks, and that's it. I think last Sunday I sent everybody over to a music stream, and then I bounced right away. So I don't know how many of you actually stuck around for live music. There's nobody really going on. I mean, we can't raid the Bob Ross channel. They don't allow incoming raids. Levels FYI for general info. Make a better discussion on salary. Yeah, for sure. You have to know what you're worth, and you have to know what you're worth in your geographic area. I kind of want to. One of these days, I'm going to go back through all the recruiter calls that I've done with companies, where they're like, "Hey, tell me about your background, blah 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 blah," and then towards the end of that conversation, it's like, "Hey, just so we're on the same page, like, what's your expectation?" And how I always turn it around on them and say, "Can you tell me about the salary band that you have in mind for this position?" Every single time, they've given me a range of numbers. Every time. They've never tried to turn it back on me and say, "Well, we just, we want to know what you're interested in." If you ask them, they will tell you. And just say, "Hey, just, can you tell me what the salary bands are?" That's all you have to say. "Can you tell me what the salary bands are for your expectation for this role?" And then they'll typically like spell it out. For me, it's been a lot of like, this is kind of the base salary range. And then, based on circumstance and whatever, there might be bonus structure, there might be a signing bonus, there might be stock equity or RSUs. And then they'll typically round that out and say, so your total compensation will come in around this much per year. How does that sound to you? Or is that kind of what you were expecting? And then all I have to say is like, yeah, that's about on par. Or yeah, that's about what I was expecting. Let's keep talking. So I'm not committing to that band. I'm still letting them know like, hey, we're still going to talk about this in the future, but for now, and I've actually answered a couple of times where they say like, this is what it's going to be. I'm like, cool, let's keep moving forward. And so I don't even necessarily tell them like, yes, that's what I'm looking for. I just say, cool, let's keep talking. So it kind of implies that I'm okay with that, but it still leaves the door wide open to negotiate later. But you have to know what you're worth. But always ask them what the salary band is. So if you get asked for salary, ask them right away. Now, if you're applying online and they say, what's your expectation? Set it to $0, set it to $1, and if you can't, like if it's like a fixed sort of range, then you have to know your value. And you have to know, based on years of experience in the current job market, which is inflated a little bit, what should you be asking for in this market? And then you can just plug that in if you want to. Or plug it in like a little bit higher than you normally would and see whether you get called. If they don't call because your salary expectation was higher than they wanted to pay, then that's fine. You wouldn't have worked there anyway if they were going to lowball you, or if they're going to offer a salary that you wouldn't have taken anyway, then it's no big deal. But if they do call, then that means they've looked at that number and they go, yeah, we could probably work with that, or we'll try to negotiate something or whatever. But then again, usually on that phone call, you can always ask them like, hey, when I applied, I put in this range, but like, what is the company offering for that role? Always ask them, and they will tell you. Like, and if they try to skirt the question and they want to hide it, at that point, then you can probably start to assume or presume that, you know, they're going to be shady about it, or, you know, they're trying to like try to get you to like name more of a number so they can like come in on the low end of your range or something like that. And those are typically companies you don't want to work for anyway. So if they're going to like kind of fight against it, then you wouldn't work there anyway. So it's no big deal to not take that job. But like I said, every interview I've been doing since November, every single interview that I've gone through where they said, what's your expectation? I immediately counter with the question, what are you offering for the role? And they've always told me. So always ask. They'll tell you. They'll give you some kind of information. Or, like I said, it's going to raise that flag of like, okay, if you're going to be, you know, kind of shady about it, then I don't want to work there anyway. So. RC Maniac doesn't have anybody streaming either. I hear a range of numbers. I'm not a huge fan when they ask what my prior salary was. Yeah, in a lot of states now they can't ask, and I would also just not tell them. If they say, hey, what were you making at that last role? I can just say, you know what, the last role is actually not applicable to this new role that I'm applying for. And so my previous salary actually doesn't matter. But, you know, what are you offering for this role? Yeah, I would just never tell them and just say, you know what, I'm under non-disclosure because of, you know, company reasons that I'm not discussing that salary. Or you can just use a blanket statement and say, my prior salary doesn't dictate my value today. And you know, I have a range in mind, but what is the company offering for this role? And if they come back and say, well, what's your range? You just say, I'd like to hear more about like what the company offers as compensation. Like just keep pressing them on it until they say a number. And if they're going to argue about it and not share a number, then you could say, you know what, I don't feel like we're communicating well. If the company can't share that information with me, then we can just stop talking and walk away. And it's no big deal. You've probably like done yourself a benefit by walking away from that job if they're going to be argumentative in an initial phone screen, you know, where they're trying to like make you believe that they're a great company to go work for if they're already treating you like that on the first phone call. So it's okay to walk away. If you get RSU stock options and they don't vest for a year or so, not being paid properly, yeah. So, I mean, one thing about Amazon is the way that their RSUs vest is the first year you only get 5% of the stock, and the second year you get 15%, and then it's 40% in the following years, because they know that they hope that that stock is going to keep going up and up and up. And so later on, when you get those 40% chunks, it's worth a lot more money. And so those first 2 years, they actually give like from what I've heard, a nice like cash offset, because they know that you're not going to get very much stock. But they still want to kind of like round it out with like a signing bonus or like an annual bonus kind of thing for the first 2 years. And then once those stocks kick in, then you don't get that annual bonus apparently. I don't know. Didn't get the job anyway, so no big deal. Trekich, good to see you in chat. Just popping in to say hi. May have resume version 2. Cool. Yeah, send it over anytime. So if anybody on the stream ever wants a resume review, go to this link. There's a form at the bottom. You can send me a resume. Please anonymize it a little bit. Like, you know, mask out your phone number, your email, or your name if you don't even want your name on there. Hide whatever information you don't want the general internet to see, and I will do a live resume review. I pull it up in a window here, and I'll kind of like tell you my perspectives on it. Again, I always tell people, like, listen to lots of ideas, lots of perspectives. You don't have to do it my way, but, you know, I will point out things, you know, having been a hiring manager and a lead on interview panels and things like that, like what I look for in a resume. So yeah. How's my job hunt going? It's going pretty good. I got like a whole new batch of companies that I've applied to, and some of them are making moves already. I'm waiting on a couple of interviews to kind of get scheduled for some big e-commerce companies, including like Square and Stripe and Peloton for like an engineering manager role at Peloton in their e-commerce division, but also a lot of developer relations jobs. So I've got like, I want to say like 7 or 8 of those kind of rolling in the works. So we'll see. And never heard anything back from New Relic as far as like what's going on with their team and their team structure and stuff over there. So I have no idea what's going on with that team. I was really disappointed that job didn't work out. But it is what it is. You know, they've got something going on with their team where they're like restructuring something, and it's like, all right, if I still happen to be looking for a job, you know, when they're opening back up, it'd be a great team to work with. In the meantime, I can't wait to find another job. I thought about taking some time off and just do like a little boot camp or something, do like a front end boot camp, and then, you know, hopefully by then New Relic would be open back up. I said, nah, I'm just going to do the Udacity thing on the side, and I'm just going to keep job hunting and see how it works out, see how it plays out. So we'll see. Cool. All right. Well, nobody else is really streaming, so I guess we'll just wind down for the night. Unless anybody in chat, do any of you follow someone that you trust that I can like go raid and send everybody over to? You're doing the Odin project? I haven't done that one myself. I thought about doing the 100 days of code and just focusing just on front end. But I hope to have a job by then. So for me, it's like I will do as many days of code as it takes to get a job. And then, not that I'm going to stop coding, but like I'm going to pour all my energy into that job. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But anyway, appreciate the new follows. Appreciate the subscriptions. I like to joke, you know, building up the merchandise and the sweaters and the t-shirts, and I got like these big desk mats and stuff like that. I may do some giveaways in January when I do the rebrand and I get the new email series out and stuff like that. I may do, you know, I'm gonna pick like somebody who's subscribed to each of the email series or something, because I'm gonna have 4 of these email series coming out in the new year. Well, probably mid-January at the rate I'm going right now. But I may do some giveaways and give away some t-shirts or sweaters or those desk mats or mouse pads or something like that, just to kind of drive some engagement a little bit. But yeah, if you want to go buy a t-shirt, you can go buy a t-shirt. I make like $3 off a t-shirt or something like that. But no, I appreciate any support. I actually don't do this to make money at all. I just love helping people out. I did it more as a goof, just so I had something to wear on the stream. But you don't have to go buy the merch. That's fine. Like I said, I'm not in this to make money. I've got plenty of financial cushion to go get a job. I'm not worried about finances at all. I was telling one of my kids, like, oh yeah, I don't have a job now. I don't have a paycheck coming in. One of my kids ran up to his room and he brought me a $20 bill. He's like, here, this is to help pay bills. I'm like, oh, dude, like, no, that's your money. It's fine. So I like pulled up the bank balance and the stock brokerage. I'm like, we got money in the bank, dude. Like, don't worry. It's not about the money. It's just, you know, I don't like just sitting around twiddling my thumbs. And so that's also why I get into the Udacity thing, just so I've got something to do, you know, while I'm waiting for other interviews and stuff like that. Plus, just to keep my own learning going. It was important for me to like keep my own learning and stuff going. Anyway, cool. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We will catch you the next time. Someone just sent me a whisper. Cool. RC Maniac, thanks for that info. I will definitely watch out for that. So I appreciate it. But yeah, we'll catch you on. This Thursday and next Thursday I'm not going to stream because it's like right up against the holidays. So this Thursday I'm not going to stream. I'm not going to stream next Thursday, but I'm probably going to stream during the day. And so I will have like a few things, probably like some of the React learning that I'm doing, some of the stuff I'm doing with the Udacity project and what I'm learning there. I may do some live streaming around that, or I may just live stream and just update folks about the job hunt during the daytime, but I'm not going to stream this Thursday or next Thursday. I will stream next Sunday. So the 26th I will stream. But I'm not going to stream the next 2 Thursdays, and then I'll be back regular schedule in January from there. So like January 2nd and onward, I'll do regular schedule from there. Remember when my father got laid off and a sibling cried? Yeah, it's not always understood for sure. And for my kids, it was like, okay, well, you know, we got to change our health insurance, and so I signed up for like Affordable Care Act, which was interesting as a process to go through. So I signed up for my own benefits. And I'm just going to pay out of pocket for my own benefits until I get a new job. But it's weird, like, because it's a different health provider than what we've had. And so now we got to call all our doctors, give them all new insurance, just to turn around, get another job and call the doctors and give them new insurance all over again. It's kind of a hassle. It would be nice if the American health system was a little easier to work with than that, but we'll see. Cool. I have a Palette 2S and a rep box. Yeah, so I have, well, that's actually the Palette 3. Up on the wall and the rep box. I do have a Palette 2. It's like over on that end of that desk. But yeah, I have a Palette 2S Pro and the Palette 3 Pro. So this is the 8 color filament one. And then I've got a Prusa Mark 3 back here with a Bear upgrade. And then I've got this Mark 3, that Mark 3. Gotta see how I'm pointing. And then next to that, I've got a Creality CR6 SE from Kickstarter. And then I've got like a CR10 Mini out in the garage that I don't use anymore that I'm trying to give away. I've tried giving it away twice in the past month, and people are like, maybe. It's like, I can't even give the thing away. But no, I'm not going to give it away in the stream because I don't have a box for it anymore, and shipping it is going to be ridiculous. It's going to be like stupid money to ship it. But I do know of people that have given away 3D printers on streams, and they get like huge engagement. So maybe if I can find a box to put it in and like keep it secure or whatever, I'll think about it. But yeah, I've got like tons of cool filament that I want to print with over the holidays and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm just going to take a break the next 2 Thursdays, but I will stream during the day, and I'll keep everybody up to date. In the meantime, keep whispering me on Twitch. Follow me on Twitter. Same username as Twitch and Twitter. You can send me DMs over on Twitter at any time. My DMs are always open. Same username on LinkedIn. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me questions there, and maybe next Sunday I'll do like more of the Q&A format, where it's just like these were questions that were submitted, and I'll just go through a whole bunch of Q&A because I do have a bunch queued up. And I'll just do like more of a formal Q&A, and I've got like a backlog of these Q&A videos to go through with the slicer software that I built that actually like cuts out the shorter videos and do the podcast. So my podcast and YouTube channels have been like kind of stale as far as like those daily releases. And so my goal is that in January I'm going to start doing like those daily releases again, because I got a backlog of stuff to get through. So in between my jobs and building cover letters and resumes and everything else, I do want to go through and actually like slice those things up and get more of that content ready to produce, and do more of that regular thing in the new year. But I do need to record new intros and outros because I don't work at that job anymore where I say like, hey, I'm an engineering manager at this job, because I don't have that job anymore. So I got to go through and re-record those as well. And so that's part of what the delay has been. Is I was hoping to get that new job so that I could just record new intros and say, this is what this is where I work. Because I think that wherever I do go work, they're going to appreciate that I'm like dropping their name on the podcast and stuff like that. Even though they won't, like, they're not sponsoring it, but they're effectively paying a paycheck and paying for my way of life at that point. So I don't mind mentioning my employer on those kinds of things. And just specify like I'm not sponsored by them, but this is where I work. But yeah, anyway, we'll see how that plays out. Thanks again for hanging out on chat. I was going to wrap this up like half an hour ago, and then I keep going. But I appreciate everybody dropping by. Thanks for all the questions in chat as well. So I'm not going to stream Thursday. Next Sunday will be more Q&A format. But if you do send me a resume, I will do more resume reviews. So send those over anytime, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for hanging out. Have a great holiday if you celebrate the holidays. If not, have a great week. Have a great weekend coming up. And we'll catch you on Sunday, next Sunday. See you, folks.